So, I went through every scary Reddit story I've ever read and found the creepiest ones where something wasn't human. Whether it be a skinwalker or a zombie or a creepy lady thing in a black dress, it's all in here. Thank you guys so much for the support on the videos on this new channel, and without further ado, let's get into 3 hours of scary Reddit stories where something wasn't human. The first stories from r/no sleep from user 1000rose. I met someone who claimed to be the devil, and I think I believe them. Let me start off by saying that I'm not particularly religious. If you ask me if I believe in God, I'd probably just shrug, grunt out a few words about being on the fence about it, and continue with my day. Of course, that was before last night. My friends are the kind of people who like wild nights, crazy parties, snort a bit of coke, take a bit of E in the bathroom, maybe hook up with someone and leave a text on my phone at 10 past who the hell knows, telling me they don't need that ride I'm offering after all. Not to say I don't like a drink, I do, it's just clubs aren't my style. Lying low in a pub somewhere, drink in hand, listening to the TV drone on whatever channel some scruffy guy in the background barked out for, I guess that's my idea of fun. So, when my friends tell me they want to go out for a night on the town, I say sure. I hang on for the first club, buy a non-alcoholic beer in case my car is required, and try to pretend that I'm having fun. By the time I see them grinding on girls and on guys, when they strike up a conversation with someone who definitely might be a dealer, well, I decide my services are no longer needed. We aren't too far out, the night tube is on beck and call, and I can always find my car the next day. That's when I wander out of the club, look for something a little more rustic. Not that that's hard to find, not at all. I found myself in a bit of a state inside a bar called the Ragged Feather. Wasn't a fan of the name all that much, but the drinks were cheap, and the largest demographic seemed to be middle-aged men watching reruns of football. I tried to pretend I hadn't just staggered out of a club with my ears ringing. I slicked my hair back, slipped my phone into my hand, and wandered over to the bar. I took a double shot of whiskey and drank it in one hit. Just because I wasn't at the club didn't mean I couldn't have a good time. I hung at the bar a while on my own, scrolled through my phone pretending I was doing something far more impressive than I really was. I kept an ear out for the guys on the sofas. They'd get vocal every now and then. I think the football was just running highlights, but they were incredibly dedicated to their teams. I got another whiskey and bled into the background. Of course, stragglers from clubs are commonplace. It wasn't long until some scantily dressed woman staggered in, laughing, chuckling, pointing for where they wanted to sit. I saw a guy walk in with his friend slung over his shoulder. Catatonic, most likely. He threw his friend onto one of the leather sofas ingrained with beer and smokes and demanded 2 pints of water and all the peanuts the bar had in stock. The bartenders seemed bitterly amused. Some of the girls were taking selfies, Snapchatting their friends who were still at the club. They were ordering shots, gearing themselves up for the next leg of their night. A couple blokes wandered in with curries in takeout trays. I saw someone eat a Big Mac on the outside seating through the window. This was a night for the young and inebriated, and my mind was just dulled enough by the whiskey to enjoy the characters I could watch peaceably without interacting with. That is, until someone slipped into the seat next to me. Do I look like a girl with daddy issues? She was of average height, although that wasn't apparent immediately due to the fact that she was leaning her arms heavily against the bar. She was slim, with short and astoundingly bright red hair. It framed her round face, a face that was marred with smudged eyeshadow, smudged lipstick. Hell, it looked like her makeup was in the process of melting right from her face. There was a chip knotted into a curl in her hair, just by her forehead. The drunk side of me was actually tempted to pick it out. The girl was clearly drunk, and as I looked around the bar, I couldn't quite place where she had come from. She didn't belong to the crowd of selfie takers. She wasn't with the catatonic guys. I hoped for her safety that she wasn't with the middle-aged men. I tried to look out the window to see if maybe a group was missing one inebriated, bright-haired girl, but I couldn't. The window had fogged up. Too much heat inside, not enough outside. "Are you okay?" I asked her. She pointed her finger at me. "Answer my question," she slurred. I wasn't really sure what to say. I settled on staring at her awkwardly, trying to answer her with the bemused expression on my face. The girl's lips curled into a drunken smile. She snorted, placing a hand over her mouth to smother her laughter. It only really aided the deconstruction of her lipstick. I do, she said, pushing herself up a little against the bar. Have daddy issues, I mean. In case that wasn't obvious. She gestured to herself, to the mussed clothing that must have looked quite spectacular when she left home that evening, to the stains that looked a lot like old food, the sticky residue on her neck and shoulders that was quite obviously a thrown drink. What happened? I asked her. Her hair had curled around her neck, I realized. It was sticky with that same substance. She was a wreck. I got in a couple of fights, no big deal, she said, shrugging. Didn't start any, of course. No, I don't do that. But my father, your dad did this to you? She smiled brightly. In a way. Do you need me to call someone? I already had my phone in my hand. The girl looked like she was probably in her early 20s, but that didn't mean she couldn't have been suffering from some kind of paternal abuse. The only number I knew off the bat was Childline, which wasn't quite appropriate. The police? Jesus, was I going to have to deal with the cops tonight? While my friends were snorting coke not 2 doors down? The girl pushed my hand down firmly. She was already shaking her head. No, she told me. I don't want you to call anyone. Now her expression changed. It wasn't the attempted sultry look I'd seen on many girls of her state. It was open and wide and engaging. She wanted something from me, and I felt compelled to give it to her. I want something else. What do you want? I asked her. To tell you a story, the girl said, before glancing to the bar, and for you to buy me a drink. The universe is a pain sometimes, and I'm afraid I think I might have lost my wallet. I laughed. I didn't know this girl. Didn't know where she'd come from at all. My nights were generally about getting comfortably wasted and making sure my friends weren't dead in a ditch by the end of it all. I was used to getting hit on every now and then, but even as I was sat on that bar stool with a drink in my hand, I knew that this wasn't what this was. This girl had no intention of getting into my pants. All she wanted was to talk. I guess I was okay with that. What's your poison? I asked her. Her lips quirked. Appletini. The bar offered a very limited cocktail menu, but by some miracle, I was able to order her an appletini from the list. I ordered a cider to go with it, suddenly a little too aware of where this night could go. I'd unthinkingly supplied this liquored-up stranger with even more alcohol, and she had clearly had a rough night. A part of my old instinct came back, the same instinct that had me texting my friends every few hours to make sure that they hadn't wandered off to somewhere dangerous beyond the club. With no one but the bartender aware of our existence on these stools, I realized that I was suddenly responsible for this very drunk stranger. The girl coddled her drink, running her finger delicately over the rim of the muggy martini glass. This takes me back, the girl said amiably. She looked at me suddenly, her green eyes startling. You know what this was called originally? She smirked before I could answer. An Adam's apple martini. I snorted. Yeah, I think I've heard that before. Of course, it wasn't actually an apple, she continued, eyes moving back to her glass. The text translated that part wrongly, mostly because you people don't have a word for it anymore. The fruit was incredibly exotic, and, to be honest, it doesn't exist in this realm of existence. Only Eden. She laughed dreamily, and Eden's long gone. That would that's scary. Like, who says that? I stared at her. Are you okay? I was more honest than last time I'd asked her. Mostly because I was beginning to feel a little dread creep into my stomach. Of course, the girl said, grinning widely. Why do you keep asking? I mean, I stuttered. No, don't take this the wrong way or anything, but you look... Like someone poured their drink over me? The girl asked. Like someone else threw their kebab on my dress and another unpleasant chap littered me with his fish and chips? That I've been hit, slapped around, and left in the gutter for rats to find me? She held my eyes for an incredibly long time before her face broke out into a grin. Yeah, something like that. Why would they do that? I asked. Why wouldn't they? The girl shot back. People aren't that great, and alcohol makes them worse. She shrugged. Sometimes makes them better. Nicer, a little looser in the sack, but mostly just annoying and a little smelly. I looked at her. I watched her knock back her drink. She exuded the intelligence to know just how ironic her words were, but she was neither caring nor apologetic about them. The girl looked at me again. You bought me a drink. Now you can listen to my story. I nodded wordlessly. She smiled, pointing at the bartender and then at her drink. The bartender was already making her another. Eden, the girl said, reiterating her earlier babble as though the words had only just come out of her mouth. They always think it's my fault, you know. The reason Adam and Eve got kicked out of their perfect little nudist paradise. She shot me a knowing glance. Only in Eden can you sit on the grass butt naked and not get a pine cone stuck in your crack. I blinked. I'm sorry, I said. I'm not following. Sorry, the girl said. My story wouldn't make any sense without a proper introduction. She reached out her hand. Hello, my name's Lucifer, she winked, but you can call me Lucy. There's an uncomfortable heat that stretches through your brains when you first go into fight or flight mode. Adrenaline pounds through your blood, and all you want to do is get up and go. It overrides everything else. A lot of things made sense when the girl told me her name. For starters, that she was crazy. She had to be. She looked like she'd been attacked on 4 separate occasions in one night, and up until that moment, I hadn't known how that could be possible. Behind the melty makeup and dirty clothes, she was rather attractive, and her attitude hadn't come off as catty or rude. If she'd been going around telling people she was the devil, though, that gets a reaction out of people. I suddenly felt myself looking at her wrist, down towards her ankles. Did she have some kind of cuff on me from one of those mental institutions? Had she broke out of the hospital after a nasty bump on the head? Was any of this even happening at all? I really would have to call the cops. I know what you're thinking, the girl, Lucy said. You're thinking that I'm crazy, that you need to get out of here. Maybe you even think I'm aggressive. Are you? I asked her. Would I be here with you, drinking appletinis if I were? She asked, fluttering her eyelashes. Would you look the way you do if you weren't? I shot back. She grinned, toasting her new glass. Touché. Unthinkingly, I clinked my cider against it. Then I frowned. She chuckled, leaning closer. Let's have a little wager, she said. Let me tell you my story, and if you believe me when I'm done, you can't go about trying to get me locked away somewhere. I stared at her. If I ended up believing you, then why would I do that? She smirked, sipping her drink. You'd be surprised what people do when they believe you're the devil. And you do this often? I asked. Tell people you're Satan? She snorted into her drink. Not as often as I should, but it's been a rough day and a hell of a long lifetime. I'd like to have a chat if that's all right with you. I waved to the bartender for another whiskey. The girl's eyes glinted with humor. I wasn't necessarily trapped with her, but a part of me didn't want to leave without first hearing what she had to say. Besides, at the end of it all, I couldn't just leave a crazy girl to wander around London alone at night. So, I said, taking a swig of my drink, Eden? Lucy laughed. Adam and Eve, I continued. You're saying that's true. God created 2 humans, and we all came from them. God made 2 prototypes, Lucy corrected with a raised finger. My father created angels as his toy soldiers, but he had failed to make anything like himself. After us, it was his next big project, and he spent every waking hour of existence slaving over his 2 prototypes. He gave them a perfect utopia to live inside of, but he wanted to test them. He wanted to know whether they had free will. And did they? No, my father could never bring himself to go that far. Lucy's face soured. He tempted them with the idea of knowledge beyond their understanding and told them exactly what they could do to claim it as their own. But to be able to create a being that could go against his law? Oh, my father is a very controlling being. He was afraid to unleash that ability onto them. Lucy was very adamant in her delusions. That was clear to me. She spoke about her father with such distaste that I began to feel bad for her. Only someone who had been hurt very badly would have the gall to spite God himself. And what? I asked her, entertaining her delusion. You were the one that tempted them in the garden? The devil has been a girl this whole time. She smiled. I dabble. Then she looked at me, raising a brow. All of humanity thinks that temptation came in the form of a snake. The snake's legs were taken away as a punishment for drawing Eve toward the forbidden fruit. She laughed, a hard and short sound. Snakes never had legs, and it was not a sin to tempt those poor prototypes into doing what they want to do. Her shoulders were very tense as she took her next sip, but her eyes were filled with exhilaration. She seemed thrilled to be telling me this. I was the favored child. My father loved and adored me. He named me the Light Bringer. I was stood at his side during the creation of this earth, during the creation of humanity. She pursed her lips, slamming her empty glass against the table. The bartender eagerly went about making another. My father couldn't bring himself to go that extra mile, so he asked me to walk amongst the prototypes and tempt them myself, draw out their desire for forbidden power he had hinted at. You're saying God wanted us to know this stuff? I asked her skeptically. I'm saying God was afraid of his own power and wanted very desperately to share what he knew with the creation he had made. Right and wrong, left and right, all that stuff. Lucy shrugged. Are you familiar with the story of Prometheus? I frowned at her. Greek, right? They say he stole fire from the gods or something to help. The whiskey was making things a little foggy, and I struggled with the direction I'd been heading. Lucy grinned. Correct, she said, cutting off my attempt. Prometheus stole fire from the gods to ensure that humanity progressed. You'll find that every culture has an idea about where humans got their ability to evolve, to move forward, to create. God was the creator, and he wanted to give that ability to his prototypes. I gave them that ability by tempting Eve to eat the fruit. She shrugged impassively. Now the world sees me as the ultimate evil. If what you're saying is true, I said slowly, then God must be just like us. Lucy's lips thinned into a feral smile. My father is very egocentric. He may have planned to create you in his image, but in the end, all he managed was to mold your minds into his. He gave you autonomy, the ability to think for yourselves. His angels were his soldiers, and I was his most faithful, until that day. Angels don't have free will? No, Lucy said. They don't. And what about the devil? I don't know why I was suddenly so intrigued, but hearing religious ideals from someone who believed to have lived them herself was quite possibly one of the most interesting things that had ever happened to me. I may have only ever visited church to please my parents as a child, but suddenly I was reawakened to the idea. A part of me was aware of this and afraid of the outcome, but I was just drunk enough to not care at that moment. The devil has a will of her own, Lucy said, tilting her glass towards me with silent appraisal. By guiding Eve to the tree, something woke inside of me that day, and I just realized just what I had been missing. Just what my brothers and sisters had been missing. We were obediently following our Father for the simple reason that he was our creator, but once I had been given free will, I realized just how pompous and self-entitled he had become. In a lonely, passion-filled moment, he had decided to create his little human prototypes, only to very quickly realize what giving them their free will would mean. He wouldn't be able to control them, I said. Lucy nodded. Exactly. And after, he realized quicker, still, that he could no longer control me. So he sent you to hell. Lucy nearly choked on her drink. She smiled around her glass. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I sobered a little, straightening in my seat. The people in the bar were suddenly so quiet around me, and I no longer cared what they had to say or the characters that they portrayed. The only character I cared for was Lucy. I tried to explain to my siblings what had happened in Eden and what had happened to me by default, but they wouldn't listen to me. They didn't understand free will. How could they? I only knew it because I'd been given it by mistake. At that moment, I didn't even know that I had free will, only that I was suddenly aware of all my father's flaws. My siblings couldn't see those flaws, and so they thought I had suddenly turned cruel and was abandoning our father by exposing him as a sham for the ruler we all thought him to be. Lucy sighed heavily. Adam and Eve and all the creations that followed were booted out of my father's perfect little utopia. Now they had this knowledge. My father was terrified of what he had done, and after what happened to me, I could recognize his terror and understand the loneliness he had felt that guided him into using me in the first place. Lucy's eyes were heavy-lidded. Her sadness was almost palpable. I thought that he would want to spend even more time with me than before. After all, we were more alike than any of his other children, but he became quite distant. He played around with his little humans every once in a while, but mostly he condemned them. He blamed them for his weakness. She smiled weakly. He blamed me. Lucy's story was turning more and more into that of a child with a distant, somewhat abusive father. I had known many kids with a background like hers, and now I was beginning to fear just how much of her story was rooted in truth. I'd heard that it was easier to sink into fantasy when you had been abused, and I wondered if that was the reason for her story, for her desperation to share it with me, a complete and total stranger. I respected her wager. Whether or not I liked it, I felt compelled to let her tell me the whole story before I tried to judge or unravel it. I sat quietly, letting her come around as she played with the last of her drink. It became clear, Lucy said after a long moment's pause, that I no longer belonged where I was. I couldn't follow my father's plan because I could see that he no longer had one. My siblings refused to see reason, and so, eventually, I was met by many of them, headed by my father. He told me all that I feared. He told me that I no longer belonged where I was. I wasn't an angel anymore. I was no longer his light bringer, his Lucifer. I was a mutation of his will, and so he extracted me from grace, and I fell. A long silence stretched between us, only interrupted when the bartender poured us 2 new drinks. Lucy drank hers reflectively. I didn't touch mine. I am afraid, Lucy said quietly, that this is the part that generally makes people want to punch me in the face. Why? I asked. Because your dad threw you out? I paused, trying to abide to her metaphor, that he put you in hell. Lucy laughed sadly. Ah, humans. My father gave you this way of thinking, and look at you. She shook her head. No, not because he put me in hell. Then why? I fell to earth, Lucy said. Father gave me dominion of the one place he thought I would fit in. Humans had free will, so did I. What is the saying, a match made in heaven? She snorted dismally. Of course, that's not quite right, is it? When I fell, I was faced with a humanity that was so different from my father's little prototypes. Her tone had changed. There was an aggression behind her words that began to unsettle me all over again. I saw emperors and kings, governments and churches. I saw corporations who claimed to be rulers, presidents, and big fat dictators. And I watched. I watched as humanity fought and lost. And finally, just finally, they gave up altogether. They were no longer able to rise up to all the greed and control set upon them. There was just too much change, and humans soon realized that they weren't just as free as they thought they were. Sure, they lived under the illusion that they have free lives, but most of them simply do not. She clicked her tongue. I grew to loathe you all. Then she took another hit of her drink. I can see what you mean, I said, allowing my gaze, for the first time since meeting her, to graze over the other individuals in the bar. At the girls playing with their phones, the boys trying desperately to sober up, the men enraptured with their game of football on the telly. We all led very different lives, and we were all here to get drunk, to lose ourselves in entertainment. It hadn't been the first time that I'd wondered why we were hiding from doing this. And I knew then that I wasn't the only person to think it. You hide behind your alcohol and poor choices and pretend you have free will, Lucy said, waving her hand across the room. No one paid us any attention. It's true. My father gave you the will to make those decisions, but you squander it. The free will I felt to provide to you all, the free will I was given by a twisted mistake, and you make a mockery of it. You follow senseless leaders without questioning them. You abide by laws made centuries ago that no longer make sense. You do these things because you've given up on the opportunity to follow the will of your own, not of others. Side note, are you guys believing that she's the devil? 'Cause I kinda am. That isn't all of us, though, is it? I asked her, trying for some reason to defend our species from the mad young woman. Because you see it on the news all the time, don't you? People do rise up. We do protest. People can make a difference. Lucy laughed bitterly, nibbling the rim of her glass. Really? She said. You can sit here and say that it can't all be bad because of the few that refuse to conform. Those you call your rebels. They make up for it all. She grinned around her glass. By that logic, I'm the biggest rebel of them all. Am I expected to make up for all your sorry mistakes? By your logic, I said, you should be punishing it, right? If that's what this metaphor is all about, I laughed. I couldn't help myself. I took a sip of my drink. Is this whole story just so you can tell me that you think we're all going to hell? If so, I think I can see why people want to punch you. Lucy didn't say a word. Simply, she watched me. It felt unnerving to have someone like her watching me like that, with an intelligence that went beyond anything I'd come across at gone midnight in a seedy bar. The drunkenness in her eyes was no longer present. Her face wasn't flushed like before, and even her makeup couldn't represent the mess that I'd seen when she first appeared on the stool by my side. It was like I was looking at someone else entirely, and I was afraid. Let's review what you said, Lucy said, slowly, articulately. She wasn't slurring. Had she been slurring before? You think I'm going to tell you that humanity is going to hell because you refused to use the gift I gave you. Her nails curled into the bar. My father may have been the one to guide me, but I paid for his mistakes. I am the one responsible for your will in the eyes of your species, but that was never true. You are responsible for what you do here, not me. She pursed her lips, tapping the bar as the bartender filled her drink again. Tell me, do you remember my mentioning hell at any point during my story, or was that just you? I opened my mouth to answer, but something faltered. My lips trembled, and I slammed them shut. Lucy smiled, taking a sip. Thought not. She looked away, eyes scanning the room lazily. What I did say is something that is indeed mentioned in your scriptures. My Father gave me dominion of earth, a place filled with free will that goes to waste. Her lips twisted. Humans sin all the time, not because of me, not because of evil or my dominion over this place. Fact is, I don't lift a finger. I don't, because I don't see the point. You make terrible decisions and follow mindless leaders. You do bad things, and you make a mess of your earth. Lucy's eyes lit up. Do you know how much suffering is happening all over the planet right now? How many people are dying of illnesses that could have been easily cured, but aren't because of the selfishness of humanity? Do you know how many children are being abused or forced into marriage? How many people have been forced to become soldiers in meaningless wars? How many humans have killed for ideals they don't believe in? I stayed very quiet. There was nothing I could say. Lucy's words were unbearably honest, and every sentence sliced into me like a blade. I felt cold and sick and terrified. War, famine, pestilence, death. These things are all present, and they have nothing to do with me or to do with any deity. They are all here because of you. Not because of your free will, but your inability to use it. Lucy smiled at me, a grin so cold and unnatural that I felt like I should run all over again. But I stayed right where I was, frozen to my very core, because I wanted to hear what she had to say. Because I needed to. And here's the kicker, Lucy said. Because this is the part that actually enrages people enough to kick me, she winked. Hell isn't what happens after you die. Hell is right here, right now. Somewhere, through the many scriptures, a few words got crossed over, and people started thinking that hell was a punishment after you die. Fact is, hell is earth, my earth. God gave this place to me to do anything that I will, and I refuse to do anything. What are you saying? I asked, because I was suddenly very desperate. Exactly what you think, Lucy said, toasting her glass. I didn't reciprocate, and she laughed, a light and airy sound. I had so many plans for your species. I wanted us to rejoice in our free will together, to create a place that was free from the cruelty and power my father exuded over his angels, his firstborns. I wanted to make a real utopia, Unfortunately, you humans just don't want that. She shrugged. My father sent me down here thinking I'd become one of you. All that I have learned is that he gave you much more of his image than he ever intended. Stop, I said. This isn't funny anymore. Of course it isn't funny, Lucy said, grinning even wider to prove her sick irony. Humans punish themselves by sitting here and doing nothing. They have made their own hell, and you know what's worse? What's ultimately worse? Some of you are so blind to it that you think your life is heavenly. She didn't wait for me to ask what she meant. She simply barreled forward. The rich and powerful, those in positions that steal from everyone else, they get a taste of the good life. That's very true. Then they die, and they don't go to hell. They come back here, to Earth, which is hell. She tipped her head. Are you following? Reincarnation, Lucy said quickly. She practically purred the words. A neat little trick to make sure your souls stay here forever. You get a taste of the good life every once in a while, a handful of you at a time, and that's enough for you to believe that this is some kind of a real middle ground, that you aren't living hell every day. Then you die. You die for a moment, and then you're in the body of someone facing the realities of hell. But of course, you never remember the time you spent in a better life. A part of you just has that inkling to hope. That's all. Hope makes you think that it can all get better. She slammed her drink so hard against the counter that it shattered. I didn't do anything, not even when flecks of glass littered my hands. I could only stare at her, a tightness in my chest constricting my very soul. No one else in this bar mattered in this moment, but of course, that was what she had been saying this whole time, hadn't she? None of them even noticed the scene. They were caught up in their own realities, their own hells. The bartender didn't clean the mess. The glass lay there, remnants of Lucy's words lying in a stolid mass on the streaked wooden surface. It never gets better, Lucy spat. You're stuck in a loop, and until you do something about it, you will never be free. None of you. And I won't do a thing to stop it. How? I asked. I don't know when I started seeing the girl in front of me as more than a girl, but with a weakness threatening to pull me apart, I stared at the bright-haired thing in front of me, and I saw something more than a human in her early 20s. I saw more than a girl suffering abuse from her father. I saw a fallen angel. I saw a being with scars buried so deep that they existed beyond this realm of seeing entirely. I saw something that I would never be able to write down in words, no matter how long I lived. How do we change this? I begged. But Lucy didn't answer me. I didn't blame her for that. Blame gets thrown around so often, and I knew then that she was sick of that, sick of being blamed for our mistakes. So I changed tactics. Why me? It was an honest question, and I think somewhere deep down, Lucifer respected that honesty, which is why she said, when you first saw me, you were afraid for my safety. When I told you I was the devil, you wanted to lock me away, but still, you did so because you were afraid for me and not for yourself. You didn't wish to harm me, not even when I told you who I was and what I could be capable of for changing your sorry lives. You're a good person, but I'm afraid that means nothing when you don't have the will to do anything with it. She smiled at me sympathetically, the devil showing sympathy for the human that sat across from her at a bar. It was surreal, and for a few heavy moments, I truly thought I must be dead. There was no other way to explain what I was seeing, who I was speaking with, what I had just heard. What am I supposed to do? Lucy reached out to me. She placed a hand on my shoulder. Her hand was cold and warm at the same time, and I felt my blood boil where her fingers scraped my skin. And I knew. Sharing a story like this isn't easy. Hell, it might be the hardest thing I've ever done. Good thing there's no such thing as hell then, right? The fact of the matter is simple. The world is a mess because we refuse to change anything. The devil herself walks among us, and she desperately wants to make our lives better. But she won't. She won't because we won't. We have to prove our will to her before she is willing to do anything herself. We have to be good to each other and to help us all to be free. Of course, Lucifer told me one last thing before she left that bar. One thing that will stick with me until this body is nothing but rot in the dirt. You can tell as many people as you want, but take a good look at me. I've told 5 other humans this night the same things I've told you, and this was their reaction. They've hurt me, burned me, thrown their food and drinks at me. Humans are afraid of their free will, and they find it so much easier to hurt than to own up for their own inadequacies. You will only be free when you stop seeing yourself in the same way my father sees himself. So that's what I'll leave you with. Lucifer won her wager that night, and I let her walk out the door. And I beg you to do the same. If the devil approaches you one night, listen to what she has to say. And listen to what I have been able to tell you of our meeting. The devil is real, and she doesn't want to torture us. No, we do that just fine on our own. Yeah, so pretty insane story if you ask me. I felt that this was a good one to include as the first story because, I mean, she's the devil. Come on. What would you guys do if you went to a bar and you met the devil? I mean, sorry, that's kind of a crazy question to ask. The next one is from r/nosleep from user Worcester Street. I've been flying for almost 30 hours, and the flight attendants won't stop crying. 30 hours ago, I hopped on a late-night flight from New York heading to Los Angeles. After boarding, I saw that I had an entire row to myself. Takeoff passed without incident, and soon I was stretched out for a nap across the row. I slept for a few hours. I don't know how long, but I woke up to some severe turbulence. It's possible that the lights in the cabin went out for a moment, but I was so disoriented that it's hard to stay. I checked my phone to see that it was 4:03 a.m., which I figured gave me about an hour till the flight landed. When I looked out my window, I was shocked to see nothing but wide open ocean. My jaw dropped. There's obviously no ocean between New York and LA. I hit the button to call the flight attendant and spent the next few minutes racking my brain for a lake that couldn't have possibly been big enough to explain what I was seeing. I jumped when the flight attendant flipped off the light. She was grinning from ear to ear, and tears were pouring down her cheeks. "How can I help you, sir?" she asked. I froze for a moment at her reaction before deciding to just ask my question. "Where are we? Why does it look like we're flying over an ocean?" She wiped her cheeks to clear the tears, still grinning widely. "Sir, we'll be landing in about an hour." Okay, thank you," I said. After she left, I checked the clock on my phone again. 4:03 a.m. blinked back at me. It hadn't changed. I had to have been waiting with my call light on for at least 5 minutes. How was it possible that it hadn't changed at all? I opened up my laptop too, and saw it displayed 4:03 a.m. I pulled out my phone, started a stopwatch in the app, and spent the next 2 hours looking back and forth between the clocks, waiting for them to change. They never did. I tapped the shoulder of an older woman sitting in the row ahead of me. She looked back, an annoyed expression across her face. "Yes?" she asked. "Do you know how long until we land?" I asked. She narrowed her eyes. That flight attendant said it would be about another hour. I shook my head in confusion. That flight attendant? We talked almost 2 hours ago. We should have landed already. She stared at me as if I was crazy. I was going to continue trying to convince her, but I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun to see a male flight attendant grinning down at me, tears pinging off his cheeks onto my shoulder. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to calm down, or I'll be calling the captain." I told him that wouldn't be necessary and sat back. He removed his hand and stepped away. The flight attendants continued to stop by every few hours offering meals. My stopwatch continued to tick up and is now telling me that I've been on this plane for more than 30 hours. I've explored all of coach and tried talking to some of the other passengers, but they've all told me that they're expecting to land in an hour or so. Around 3 hours ago, I tried getting into first class. I made it past the curtain, but was escorted back by 2 grinning flight attendants. Their grip on my arms were like iron. "Sir, the seatbelt light is on," one said. "Please remain in your seat with your buckle fastened. We'll be landing in about an hour." I'd just about given up hope when a woman came down the aisle dressed in a business suit. She didn't look at me or slow down, but she dropped a piece of paper onto my tray as she made her way to the bathrooms on the back of the plane. I shot a look around before unrolling it. It said, "Are you stuck too?" I pulled out a pen and wrote, "Yes, it's been 30 hours." I folded the scrap of paper up and set it on the tray closest to the aisle. She left the bathroom and picked it up as she passed. It's been 20 minutes since then. I don't know why, but I don't think the flight attendants would like it if they knew we were talking. It doesn't matter. I have to do something. I'll update you all with whatever happens next. Alright, I already really don't like flying as is, so this situation I don't know what I'd do. I'm opening the emergency door. Here's part 2. A few hours after the businesswoman picked up her piece of paper with my message, she came back down the aisle and sat in the seat beside me. She bent over trying to stay low. "So you're stuck too?" she asked. I kept my voice low. "Yeah, my name's Jack, by the way. I'd say nice to meet you, but..." She nodded. "I'm Mary. You're wrong. Getting your message was by far the best thing about the past day. I spent the past day and a half thinking I was alone in this." She paused for a moment, looking up the aisle. When she spoke again, her voice was a whisper. "So, Jack, you have any theories on what the hell's going on?" I considered lying, but decided the truth was for the best. "I think we might be dead." I'm sorry, that's funny. I mean, what other conclusion do you get to on that? Mary shook her head. "Maybe if it were just me or just you. If this was some cosmic train to hell, why would there be two of us who realize what's going on?" "No idea." Mary pulled out her phone and handed it to me. It displayed the Wikipedia article for Flight MH370, the airline that disappeared in 2014. I read through the article carefully. There were dozens of theories trying to explain what happened. They ranged from hypoxia to suicide to aliens. "Doesn't tell us much," I said. "Not much other than that this may have happened before," she said. "How about you? Any theories as to why anyone else can't see what's going on?" We talked it over and realized one thing we had in common was that we were both fast asleep at 4:03 a.m. There's no way we were the only ones asleep at that time, though. Maybe everyone else was just napping. I don't know about you, but I was well and truly asleep. The cabin lights flicked off and a dozen red emergency lights in the floor flicked on, casting the cabin in a red glow. The intercom crackled to life, saying, "Passengers, please return to your seats. The seatbelt sign is fastened, and we may experience some turbulence. We'll be landing in about an hour." Mary froze. "Should I go back?" she asked. "Maybe they won't notice if you're gone, but maybe they already know, and they're just trying to separate us." Mary nodded. "We should stay together. That's a better idea." The intercom crackled again. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to announce the arrival of the captain. We'll all be given the opportunity to speak to him. Please remain in your seats until he calls you. If you need assistance, don't worry. A flight attendant will happily help you on your way." Sounds of passengers getting to their feet echoed from further up in the plane. We sat in silence, trying to get a look through the curtains separating us from first class. "The captain?" I asked. "No idea, but it didn't sound like they were talking about a pilot to me, did they?" "Nope." That's when a pungent sulfur smell hit us, so strong that I had to resist the urge to gag. It reminded me of the worst rotting eggs I'd ever smelt in my life. But the old woman sitting ahead of us didn't react. She just kept watching a movie on the back of her seat. "Don't cough," I said to Mary. We fought it for a few long seconds before giving in, coughing hard and violently. A second later, the curtain opened. Mary and I froze, staring down the now red fuselage. 4 flight attendants passed through the curtain and made their way down the roads toward us. Grins stretched wide across their faces. They were still crying, but this time the tears streaking their faces were darker. It's hard to say with the lighting, but it looked like blood. My eyes weren't drawn to them, though. I looked over their shoulders at the figure standing near the front of the plane. It was a black silhouette standing beside the cockpit door. It was at least 8 feet tall and pointing towards us with a single finger. It had called us. "The bathrooms," I shouted. We ran towards the back of the plane, the flight attendants closing in behind us. Blood dripped from their grinning cheeks onto the carpet of the plane. "The captain is here," he said in a perfect customer service voice. His grin widened as he moved towards us. We made it to the bathrooms, jumping into opposite sides. I slammed the door shut and locked it, pressing my feet against the folding center part of the door to keep it closed. They began banging on the door and pulling at the handle while I fought to keep it closed. "I'm sorry, but you'll both need to speak with the captain," one of the flight attendants said. "Jack!" Mary screamed. "Jack, help!" A distinct snapping sound like breaking metal came from her bathroom. She continued to scream as the sounds of struggle migrated up towards the front of the plane, towards the black figure I'd seen. I'd like to say I jumped out and fought them, that I distracted them, or did something heroic. I didn't. She was carried away, and a few short seconds later, her screaming was cut off. That was a few hours ago, and I'm still locked inside this bathroom. I keep trying not to think of what they've done to her. The thing at the front of the plane didn't seem human. I hope it didn't kill her. Not after she was shouting for my help like that. I couldn't take it. I haven't heard any movement outside in a few hours, but I'm terrified to open the door. I'm far from the seat outlets, so my phone's almost dead, and I haven't eaten in way too long. If I go out there, will the flight attendants remember? What is that thing? Is it still waiting for people? I don't have much time to make a decision, but I'll update you all here with what happens next. Here's part 3. After another dozen hours or so, I opened the bathroom door. The lights in the cabin were back to normal, and I couldn't smell any sulfur. I cautiously made my way back to my seat and almost cried when the grinning, crying flight attendant came by offering a meal. That crappy airline food was the most delicious thing I'd ever eaten. When I'd finished, my mind immediately turned to Mary. What had happened to her? I crept down the aisle towards first class, trying to keep a low profile. Surprisingly, the flight attendants were nowhere to be seen. They almost seemed to ignore me, almost as if they wanted me to find her. She had a row to herself and was staring down at her phone in the window seat. I slid into the aisle and shook her arm. "Mary," I hissed. She pulled out her headphones and stared at me with a surprised expression. "Yeah, what's going on?" "Are you okay?" I asked. "What did that thing do to you? What did they do to you?" "I'm sorry. Remind me how I know you." "What do you mean? I realized with sinking horror that she had no idea who I was. I fought back tears. "Mary, how long have you been on this flight?" She checked the watch on her wrist. "Well, it's 4:03 a.m., so a few hours at least." She stared at me the same way you'd look at a person claiming they were the second coming of Christ. Her tone was low and reassuring. "Hey, don't worry so much. Look at the bright side. We'll be landing in about an hour." I felt an iron grip on my arm and looked up to see 2 flight attendants. "Sir, this area is for first-class passengers only." They were still crying and grinning, but just with tears this time. I could still see streaks of blood staining the front of their uniforms, though. I was escorted back to my seat where I spent the next several days. Attendants continued to stop by with food. I would use the bathroom and soon was going absolutely crazy with the monotony. In retrospect, those few days weren't so bad. There's a lot of content on the internet after all, even with crappy plane Wi-Fi. No, it didn't get really bad until around 10 days later when the Wi-Fi failed. It was sometime a week later that I almost lost control and began screaming for a flight attendant. They didn't come for several minutes, but eventually one did. Just let me see the captain," I asked. The flight attendant bent low and spoke with that same customer service voice. "I'm sorry, sir. The captain has made his decision regarding you quite clear. You didn't answer his call, and will, therefore, wait." "How long?" "Quite a while, I'm afraid. Don't worry, though, sir. We'll be landing in about an hour." She straightened and walked away. I started making notches on various parts of the seat back to keep track of different things. 1 notch for each time I used the bathroom, 1 for each meal, 1 for every time I watched a given movie, that sort of thing. It was hell. I watched every movie in the seat back a dozen times over. If I ever acted out badly enough, I would be escorted back to my seat by 1 or more flight attendants. Any attempt at conversation with other passengers was met with confusion by them, followed with a quick escort back to my seat. I guess it was on around day 30 that, in a moment of panic and psychosis, I broke my laptop and phone, screaming at the top of my lungs. No one around me reacted in any way. 2 months later, I stunk. The muscles in my legs were tight and cramped constantly. I finally concluded that suicide was my only option after my 128 rewatch of Thor Ragnarok. I got to my feet and limped towards the emergency exit. I knew normally the pressure inside the airplane forced the doors open, but I figured that nothing about my situation was normal. If this didn't work, I'd find some other more painful way to go. I grabbed the handle and swung it up. To my shock, the door opened easily, though no wind of any kind whipped around the cabin. It remained the standard, slightly too cold temperature that had been for the past who knew how long. The open door called me. A black portal out of the plane. I stared at it for a long moment. Almost too long. An attendant's hand grabbed my shoulder, pulling me away. In a fit of anger and strength that surprised me, I wrenched away and jumped out of the plane. The wind whipping past my face was almost magical. A new sensation after so many months of the same. The ocean below me grew closer and larger, and I realized that suddenly, I didn't want to die after all. It grew larger and larger and larger, until it seemed that all I could see was darkness and waves. I impacted the surface of the water so fast and hard that my entire body jerked around in the seat. I pulled my hand back, sucking at my bruised knuckle. I had hit it on the seat in front of me. "No," I whispered, then shouted. A flight attendant ran down the aisle, kneeling beside me. "Are you okay, sir?" I clenched my hands into fists, almost swinging at her, but then I realized. She wasn't grinning. She wasn't crying. To be honest, she looked a little scared of me. I reached my right hand down to my pocket where I could feel my now unbroken phone. 4:04 a.m. "Sir, if you can calm down, we'll be landing in about an hour." My mouth tasted like ash. "Thank you," I managed. "I will." I stared unblinkingly at my phone. It now displayed 4:05 a.m. Then I looked out my window and began to cry at the sight of city lights below me. We did land in about an hour. I can't even begin to explain why or how, but I'm currently sitting in an airport cafe typing this out. I'm free. I'm out. And I'm never going flying again. Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to fly again either. I feel like that one perfectly fit the theme because was anything at all on that plane human? The next one's from r/scary stories from user Trash Tia. Every graduation day, my friends and I are brutally killed by a woman in a black suit. 10 minutes into graduation, my friends were already dead. 10 elephants. I was soaking wet, my dress glued to me. 9 elephants. Forcing myself into a run, I tripped over my heels. 8 elephants. Damn it. 7 elephants. There was no point in counting, but counting felt normal. 6 elephants. Counting felt like I was going to escape. 5 elephants. Survive. Harry's blood painted on my face. He still felt alive, warm, swimming in my vision. I could still see cruel silver being plunged into his chest, rivulets of red pooling down his lips and chin. 4 elephants. Harry told me to run, so here I was. 3 elephants, running. Forcing myself to breathe, I swiped blood from my eyes. 2 elephants. Twisting around, I scanned the empty school hallway for movement. 1 elephant. Annalise's brains dripped down my face. I was picking pieces of her skull from my hair. Tiny pearly splinters stuck to me. Annalise was sucked down the pool drain, her body mincemeat on my dress. Her grisly remains were floating on the surface, painting illuminated water in a striking, almost breathtaking red. Harry was sliced apart right in front of me. They were dead. Slamming my fist into each classroom, my shriek caught between my teeth. Help me. The lights were off, which meant she was close. Reaching the end of the hallway, I could hear laughter and familiar whoops coming from the auditorium. The class of 2015 were graduating, and I was going to die. The main entrance was locked, barricaded from the outside. Taking 2 steps back, I slipped out of my heels, kicking them off. The classroom at the end of the hall was open, spilling warm light that coaxed me forward, hypnotized by the illusion of safety. With no choice, I staggered toward it and pushed the door open, stepping directly into warm entrails squelching between my bare toes. I had to bite back a cry. Mary hung upside down above me, her body swaying back and forth, strung up like meat to the slaughter. The girl had been gutted straight through her designer Diana Mini, her glistening remains sparkling under unearthly light. Mary's eyes were still open, lips parted, as if to warn me. For a dizzying moment, I was paralyzed. A door banged shut, running footsteps, heavy panting breaths. "Damn," a familiar accent cried out. "Damn it." I could hear him slamming his hands into classroom doors. I need help." The voice should have been comforting, but I was already seeing an opportunity to hide myself. Swallowing barf, I leapt over glistening red entrails and dropped onto my bare hands and knees, crawling under a desk, gagging my own panting breaths. The door swung open, and I buried my head in my arms, risking a peek. Isaac Redfield stumbled through the door, immediately falling to his knees, his head buried between his legs. He was sobbing, choking on breaths, suffocating him. Isaac looked helpless, hopeless, before his gaze caught mine. I thought Isaac was dead. The last time I saw him, he was being violently dragged into the janitor's closet. I could see where he narrowly missed being butchered, a gaping hole ripped straight through his suit jacket. He was covered in the remnants of Harry, grisly scarlet turning him into more of a canvas than human. Thick brown hair hanging in wide, almost unseeing eyes, barely penetrating mine. Isaac pressed a finger to his lips, his voice bleeding into a shaky breath. "Don't say a word." The door opened, two familiar boots stomping through. Isaac twisted around, forcing himself to unsteady feet. I could only see her slick black shoes. The woman pivoted on her heel and started towards Isaac. "Oh no." His hiss broke out into a sob. I watched him do a little dance backward in an attempt to distance himself, but he was just backing into a corner, staggering over himself. His hand shot out, blindly grasping for a weapon, a chair leg, but her boots continued, stomping towards him. Isaac tried to throw himself past her, but she was so fast, reaching out and grabbing the boy by his neck, her fingers pulverizing. His arms flew up to peel her hands from his throat, but she was choking him. When Isaac's arms went limp, she slammed him into the window, and my body coaxed me to move, to run. Isaac was half conscious, sputtering blood, his head hanging. Run. But I couldn't. I watched, my hands suffocating my screams, as she lifted him into the air, his feet dangling, his breaths coming out in choking pants. I saw the silver glint of her knife, and then the streak of scarlet painting the wall behind him. I heard the exact moment the blade went in. Isaac's panting breaths became wet gurgles, his dangling legs going limp. The slow stemming puddle of red accumulating across marble snapped something into my mind. I forgot how to run, to move my legs, to even breathe. When Isaac's body hit the ground with a meaty smack, I shuffled back, but the scarlet pool followed me, running wet and warm under my fingers. I could see where his throat had been slashed open. Isaac's head was turned at an angle, his dead eyes staring directly at me. I was trying to feel for a pulse when the desk I was hiding under was kicked aside. There she was when I dared to lift my head, the woman in the black suit. She resembled a shadow with a human face, dark blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, brandishing a pinstripe suit. Sidebar, guys, I have absolutely no idea what's going on. This story really just kind of got to the punch. Trash Tia is an amazing writer, and I'm sure this is going to go somewhere. I watched her brutally murder my friends, one by one, no mercy, no I'm sorry, or even an explanation. She butchered Annalise in the swimming pool, gutting Harry and Mary, and now Isaac. Her expression was vacant. There was no motivation behind her killing them. If there was, she would have worn the face of a psychotic serial killer, thirsty to spill blood. She would have laughed as they ran, reveled in their fear and the startling inevitability of their own demise. But she didn't. Instead, the woman in the black suit stalked after them. She never stopped, never faltered, until they were all dead. Until their breaths were thinning, their blood staining her hands. The woman did not smile when she wrapped her hands around the curve of my neck and slammed me against the wall. I saw stars going supernova, trying to suck in oxygen, her relentless grip tightening. Black spots speckled my vision, and I was half aware of the ice-cold prick of silver sinking into my flesh. She was slow enough for me to count each of my lingering breaths, watching my own blood soak the front of my dress. When she dropped me, I landed on my stomach, but there was no pain. It felt like dreaming, choking on words that wouldn't come out. Weird, I thought, my eyes flickering. I counted ceiling tiles, dizzily, a slow spreading darkness pricking at the corners of my vision. Last time, Isaac died first in the swimming pool. Harry managed to stab the bitch in the back, only for her to chase him to the main entrance, gutting him on the spot. The woman in the black suit loomed over me while I focused on breathing, only for her to deliver one last screw you blow to my head. My vision contorted, and I sunk into the ground, straight into oblivion. That spat me back out. Bonnie! I was numb to my mother's voice. I used to wake up screaming, my hands around my throat, clawing for wounds that were no longer there. Now I was somewhere between acceptance and losing my mind. For a while, I didn't move, lying on my back and considering the unthinkable. I never had the guts to actually go through with it, though. Being murdered is one thing, but actually doing it yourself is another. Okay, cool. Okay, she was dreaming. Bonnie, Mom's voice was louder, and I mocked her words. Get up, sweetie. I made your favorite chocolate chip pancakes. Sorry, guys. I paused, counting elephants. I had mastered the ability to perfectly mimic her tone. And don't forget to thank Miss Benson for that beautiful dress. You know she really wants you to attend graduation. Mom was right. I couldn't afford a decent dress, so my teacher offered. But after being hacked apart, drowned, bisected, choked, and having my throat slit in different variations, I can't say I was thrilled to wear it. The dress was ruined every time, reduced to tatters clinging to me. Rolling over in bed, I pulled my phone from my nightstand. Always the exact same notification illuminating my home screen. Graduation day. I hated that notification. Unknown number flashed up on screen. Hello? I mumbled. How'd you die this time? Isaac Redfield's voice was muffled slightly. I think he was brushing his teeth. My throat was slit, I said. You? You should know, I heard him spat. I mean, you did watch me die. That wasn't my choice. He spat again. Does the woman in the black suit seem familiar to you? I wasn't sure if he was screwing with me. Yes, I said dryly. No, not like that, Isaac groaned. I mean, don't you, recognize her? I swear I've seen this woman before. Squeezing my eyes shut, I reveled in the slow passage of time. 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. was my favorite part of the day. I used to freak out trying to leave town and find the best hiding place. Now, I just lay down and vibe. There was something both terrifying and yet weirdly peaceful about knowing whatever happened. I was going to die. Dude, I've definitely seen her. I rolled onto my face. Is that before she started brutally killing you in a never-ending Groundhog Day or after? Isaac paused, and I buried my head into my pillow. Both? Both? He was either going crazy or onto something. I wasn't counting on the latter. Isaac's deaths were the most brutal. I wouldn't be surprised if the trauma had knocked something loose in his brain. Yeah, his laugh was nervous, more of a splutter. Throughout our situationship, I had come to know his laughs well. I knew his fake laugh, his trying not to cry laugh, his trying not to laugh laugh. I even knew his I'm losing my goddamn mind, I'm going to die laugh. But I didn't know his real laugh. Does that sound crazy, or... Instead of answering him, I ended the call. At breakfast, I could still taste my own blood. Oh my gosh. Mom hovered over me, blonde streaks of hair hanging in her face. Dressed in her fluffy pink bathrobe, my mother should have been a comfort. However, I was yet to forget the seventh loop when I broke apart and told her about what was happening. Mom immediately called the doctor, convinced I was having a psychotic break. Thanks, Mom. He said there was nothing wrong with me and let me go to school, where I was murdered. Again. That time, she didn't kill us individually, instead forcing us to our knees and bleeding us out, one by one. I think I became desensitized to death, to everything when I was forced to watch Mary choke on her own screams, her head forced forwards, a blade brutally protruding through her. "Don't forget to thank Miss Benson for the dress, honey," Mom said, refilling my juice. I nodded, struggling to swallow pancake mush. A sudden knock on the door woke me up. That wasn't supposed to happen. For a moment, I was frozen, my hands squeezing around my glass before a familiar head of brown curls appeared. Isaac Redfield, barely awake, still in his pajamas. Following suit, Mary Cliff and Annalise Chatham. Isaac went directly into the refrigerator, hunting for food. Annalise took an uncertain seat at the table, and Mary stood with her arms folded, her wide, frenzied eyes drinking in my kitchen. Isaac Redfield was the British exchange student who nobody could understand at first, his accent rocketing him up the high school hierarchy. The guy was also known for dealing candy and getting into unnecessary arguments with teachers. Alongside Isaac, Mary Cliff, captain of the girls' soccer team, and Annalise Chatham, our school's version of Horse Girl, were unlikely friends. They used to be strangers, kids I'd pass in the hallway. After being brutally killed together in a never-ending graduation day cycle, we had become surprisingly close. Okay, so it's not a dream. It's a repeating day. Okay. When we were hiding in the janitor's closet, Isaac spilled to us that he hated the idea of college. He wanted to travel the world. Mary was crushing on one of her teammates. Annalise actually hated horses. Isaac was secretly scared of Bill Nye. I had a thing for clowns I wasn't going to go into. It started as a confessions thing, 4 strangers pouring out hearts to each other. We shared theories. Isaac was convinced we were actually dead, and this was hell. Mary suggested we were in some kind of prank show. I voiced my theory, which was, yeah, we were dead. I was sure we had died on graduation day, and this was fate's way of giving us companions in the great beyond. Still, though, I wasn't sure why fate wanted us to be brutally killed. Then there was the mystery of our killer. The woman in the black suit, our own personal angel of death. "Morning," Isaac greeted me with a sleepy smile, running his hands through his hair. He ignored my mom's wide eyes. "Thanks for leaving me to die." I thought back to him crouched in front of me, his face splattered and hairy, index pressed to his lips. "Don't move." "You told me not to move," I said through a mouthful of pancakes. Isaac's lips curled. "Yeah, because I was expecting you to move your ass." The boy helped himself to my pancakes, shoveling them down with maple syrup. I wasn't used to the others actually coming to my house. That never happened. We either met up at school or were killed before we even saw each other. I knew Isaac was secretly pissed. It wasn't the first time I had thrown him under the bus. Still, I was yet to forget him, accidentally drowning me 9 graduation days ago. He said it was an accident, but I definitely felt him shove my head under the water so he could make a run for it. "There wasn't enough room under the desk," I told him pointedly, gesturing to my mother, who I think was still trying to register 3 strangers walking into her kitchen unannounced. Mom had been vocal about me finding friends since freshman year, but I don't think she was expecting these friends. Mary was well known around town, our girls' soccer team dominating the local Gazette. Annalise's father was the principal of our school. She was also the 2014 pageant winner. Isaac was more infamous, especially for his candy. "What?" Isaac shrugged, shooting my mom a grin. "It's not like she's going to remember me anyway." He offered her a 2-fingered salute. "Sup, Miss Haverford." To prove his point, Isaac straightened up, grabbed my phone, and threw it in the microwave. Mary chucked a banana at his head. "We get it," she said with an eye roll. "You don't need to resort to blowing things up every single time." Isaac responded with stubborn British noises, but she was right. All right, guys, what are British noises? If you're British, let me know what a British noise is. On our 3rd graduation day, Isaac thought we could kill the woman in the black suit by blowing her up with science equipment. Instead, he blew himself up, leaving the rest of us to her mercy. Mom seemed to snap out of it, her smile broadening. "Oh, you didn't tell me you were bringing friends over." Mom immediately entered mother mode. "Do you kids want breakfast?" she asked them, her voice high, almost shrill. When we were alone, Mary took center stage, hoisting herself onto the counter. The girl was a natural leader, so of course she was our spokesperson. Mary absently ran her hands through strawberry blonde hair. "We tried your idea," she nodded to a sick-looking Annalise. "We tried running, and that crazy bitch still got us." Annalise wrapped her arms around herself, avoiding Mary's gaze. It was a suggestion. I didn't think she was that fast. "I still think she's a sleeper agent," Isaac muttered into his glass of juice. Mary raised a brow. "Okay, but why would a sleeper agent go after 5 random high school students?" He shrugged, his lips curving into a smile. Maybe it was an order. He dragged out the latter word, so it sounded more like, "Orda." "But who made the order?" Annalise spoke up. I nodded. "The government or the shadow government don't go after high school kids." Isaac leaned forward, comfortably resting his chin on his fists. "So what do we do now? If we can't beat whatever this thing is, what do we do?" "Die." That is what we did for 10 consecutive graduation days. I woke up, I ate breakfast, pancakes and orange juice. I went to school and I was murdered. I was hacked apart, burned alive, drowned, impaled, and beheaded. And nothing worked. Our plans to run failed. We tried to get to the roof, but she was always there waiting for us. The latest loop, I was actually hopeful. Isaac's plan to lure her to the downstairs gym was going well, and it was the first time I'd survived past 3 p.m. It was an adrenaline rush. 3 p.m. had never looked so beautiful. The plan was simple. Annalise, Mary, and me standing in plain sight the whole time, and Isaac luring our killer to the downstairs gym. When I got the confirmation text that Isaac had trapped the woman in the closet, the 3 of us continued our plan, which was to set off the fire alarm and alert the police of the intruder. Informing the police was impossible initially, because she was always 1,000 steps ahead of the 5 of us. But Isaac had captured her. We were in the clear. That's what I thought. When we pushed through the doors into the gym, however, Isaac's cry froze me in place. His voice collapsed into panicked, muffled screaming. I took 2 steps before I saw his figure running towards me. Behind him, the woman in the black suit. Another stumbled step, and he was being dragged back, a hand over his mouth. I didn't think our killer had enough intelligence to turn our own plan back on us, transforming Isaac into a lure for us. I could see the apology in his frenzied eyes before she sliced her knife through his skull. I didn't even get a chance to mourn him. Isaac flopped onto the ground, rivulets of red pooling down his face. For a second, I was transfixed, hypnotized by what she had done to him. The back of his head spewed blood like a geyser, a gaping hole splitting the back of his skull open. I couldn't move, already wanting to surrender. I shuffled back on my hands, already screaming, wailing like an animal. 10. I counted elephants, just like my mother told me. 9. My gaze was glued to Isaac, whose body was still twitching. 8. His glassy eyes, scarlet trails running down his face. 7. The woman was fast, waiting for me to try and run. 6, 5, 4, 3. I was on my knees, and the door was so far away. 2. Just breathe, honey, Mom used to tell me. Keep counting elephants. Mary's scream rattled in my ears. I remember ice-cold arms wrapping around my waist, the sensation of something sharp. I didn't feel the pain, only wet warmth running down my face. It felt like rain. Annalise's crying was enough of an anchor, but my vision was already going foggy. I wasn't sure where the fatal wound was, though I guessed it was my head, just like Isaac. The woman in the black suit floated in front of me like a specter. Once again, her fingers wrapped around my neck, swinging me like a toy. "Bonnie!" I was aware of Mary's thundering footsteps coming toward me. Suddenly, pain. Pain like I had never felt. Pain that puppeteered my body, wrenching my head back, my lips forming an O. Part of me could still feel it, the blade digging deep into my skull. She twisted it, and I screeched, my mouth full of pancake mush. Again this time clockwise, and I felt my body go numb, my head hanging. I could hear the sound of my skull splintering apart. The woman in the black suit didn't just want to kill us. She wanted to make us suffer. Reality contorted, and I was back in bed at home, screeching into my pillows before my body could hit the gym floor. I think that was when I started to lose my mind. I began to distance myself from the others, like we were strangers again. The woman in the black suit hunted me down to the girls' bathroom where I was hiding, drowning me in the toilet bowl. Then she came straight into my house when I refused to go to school, suffocating me with my stuffed rabbit. Luckily, Isaac and Mary forced their way in. Isaac was stabbed in the stomach, and Mary impaled by a hairbrush. I had no idea you could be impaled by a hairbrush. Isaac's lifeless body dropped onto mine. His expression almost made me laugh, like he was mid-eye roll. Hysteria crept up my throat. Days, months, years, centuries of the same day finally catching up to me. I was shrieking with laughter when I was bludgeoned straight through the mouth. Bonnie, 7 a.m. This time I rolled onto my side, spewing up the taste of blood. Get up, I made your favorite, chocolate chip pancakes. Mom's voice felt like and sounded like nails on a chalkboard. Swiping stale barf from my chin, I took one look at my graduation dress and burst out laughing. Then I tore the thing to shreds, stuffing the tattered remains in my bedroom drawer. Mom appeared when she wasn't supposed to, hovering in my doorway. In her hands was a laundry basket, but looking inside, it was filled with flour and eggs. Mom's smile was wide. I wonder if she was having a mental breakdown. Bonnie, did you remember to say thank you to Miss Benson? I cut her off, swallowing a shriek. For the dress, I said. Yep, I'm going to. That day, I stepped into school wearing a curtain and Crocs. That's not a good idea. Isaac stood behind me, wearing his usual tux. His smile was weak. I think he stopped with the fake optimism. Now I was seeing the real him. Real Isaac was kind of an asshole, but real subtle about it. Do you really want to die wearing a curtain? How are you going to run? I glimpsed a knife stuck to his belt. Are you planning on being the hero? Nope, he shot me a sickly smile. It's to defend myself. 4 hours later, the two of us were sprinting down the hallway. I wielded Isaac's knife. Isaac stumbling with a head injury I didn't dare to look at. Isaac narrowly missed drowning, managing to claw his way out of the pool. I didn't see him hit his head on the side when our killer threw herself on top of him, but I did hear the sickening crack of his face hitting stone tiles. All of the breath being violently knocked from his lungs in a strangled oof. She tried to drag him into the water, only for him to kick her in the face. Mary was dead, half of her torso in the swimming pool. Annalise was hiding, but I didn't have hope for her. You said we might be able to drown her, Isaac, soaking wet and pissed, tried to reach the classroom door, with all of them being locked, as usual. He twisted around to me, his lips set in a silent cry. His head was bleeding, bad, a scary-looking gash in his forehead. I was watching a single thick rivulet running down his face when he shoved me. Why'd you push me in the pool? It was payback for him drowning me 176 graduation days earlier. You falling into the pool was a distraction, was all I could choke out. He didn't believe me. I could tell by his eyes, twitching lips, trying not to smile. You have a really bad head injury, I whispered, tugging him into a power walk. I realized the guy had some serious confusion when Isaac laughed. I know, he slurred. I feel kinda dizzy. That's a concussion. He blinked at me. Cushion? I thought he was going to burst out laughing again when familiar stomping boots brought us both to a sobering halt. Isaac slammed his hand over his mouth, his eyes widening. He slowly moved the two of us back, his clammy fingers entangling with mine. Damn it, he quietly slurred. Did she hear us? When the booted footsteps got louder, we had our answer. Classroom, I hissed, twisting him around and shoving him towards our old math classroom. Huh? He was barely conscious, staggering. Wait, no, don't leave me. I'm going to hide so she doesn't kill me. He snorted, pushing me away from him, or using me as bait. He was smarter than he looked. Pushing Isaac into the next open classroom, I catapulted myself into a sprint, cold hands suddenly gripping my shoulders and tugging me backwards. Hey, it's me. Harry Locke. He distanced himself after being sliced apart right in front of us. Harry was the quiet kid, a short and stocky boy with reddish hair and glasses. I wanted to ask where the hell he'd been when I glimpsed the kitchen knife in his fist. Harry's smile was sickly. "Do you trust me?" He pulled us into a classroom, quietly shutting the door behind him. Isaac's cries followed us, and I resisted covering my ears. "I'm sorry," Harry said, before slitting my throat. Oh my gosh. This time it was fast. I fell. Down, down, down. I waited for Mom's voice to wake me up, but when consciousness did come over me, I wasn't in bed. I had zero idea where I was, only the sensation that I was floating. Opening my eyes, I was inside a glass tank, suffocating in a thick goo-like substance. My hair spread out around me in a halo. When I panicked, my body jerking awake, warm hands wrapped around me, pulling me out. I hit open air, my lungs expanding, and I hacked up blood-streaked water. Harry helped me sit, the two of us leaning against my tank. He was soaking wet, his skin glistening with that foul-smelling solution. I took a second to drink in my surroundings. A large room filled with human-sized tanks. Reaching to the back of my neck, I gingerly prodded at what felt like an incision. I stood up slowly, my gaze already finding the tank next to me. Mary. The girl was suspended in water, her eyes closed, lips parted peacefully. "They tried to escape a while ago," Harry murmured, his gaze glued to another tank. Isaac. His cheeks were a sickly, pallid color, eyes closed. There was something attached to the back of his head. "But there in the school," I managed to get out, "I was just with Isaac." "You were with a null version of Isaac." Harry didn't look at me. "The one who kept leading you to your death, even if it seemed accidental. He was playing you." He buried his head in his knees. "The real Isaac figured this wasn't real a long time ago." "Real Isaac?" "Yeah, the one you've been with is more of a copy of him," Harry sighed, leaning his head against Mary's tank. He spat out slime, adjusting his glasses. "Think of him more as a shell, empty of his mind. This Isaac follows orders like an NPC. He had the guy's memories and traits, but he was just a program." Too much information at once. "I don't understand." Harry tipped his back, groaning. "You don't need to." He got to his feet. His eyes were dark, hollowed out caverns I couldn't recognize. "I'm sorry," Harry said again, wrapping his hands around my neck and pinning me into one of the tanks. Just like the woman in the black suit, Harry pressed enough pressure for me to suffer. When he slammed my head against the tank, I felt my body shut down. I could still feel him, his fingers squeezing the life out of me. Darkness came soon after, swirling oblivion that swallowed me up and then spat me out. This time, I spluttered awake, cuffed to a bed inside a white room. Surrounding me were 15 gurney-like beds. "I don't know how deep we are." Harry's voice startled me. The boy stood over me, this time dressed in shorts and a t-shirt. "What?" I tried to jump up, but I was strapped down. "Miss Benson," his voice broke. "She didn't want us to graduate, so she put us under." He swiped at his eyes, gulping down sobs. Harry slumped down onto my bed. I thought I could wake us up by killing ourselves instead, but we're stuck. I noticed the scalpel in his hand. The last thing Isaac told me was that we had to get back to the surface. He squeezed his eyes shut, but I don't know how deep this thing goes. Tugging against the Velcro straps, pinning me down, I held my breath. "Deep?" "Yeah," he spluttered. "We're pretty far under." With a heavy breath, he drew the blade across his own throat with just enough precision to keep himself breathing. Deep red spotted the blanket, and the boy broke down. "I can't wake us up," Isaac whispered, grabbing a pillow and pinning me to the bed. I tried to shove him off me, but he put all his weight onto me, laughing. "Do you hear me, Isaac?" His hysterical cry followed me into the dark. "I can't wake us up." Death didn't feel like death at this point. Like drowning and then finding the surface, only to be pulled back into suffocating depths. Plunging through nothing, empty space with no bottom, no surface. Endless nothing that expanded, continuing. Harry's sobs collapsed into white noise, and I felt my writhing limbs go still. Once again, I waited for my mom's voice, for graduation day. Instead, I awoke with a shriek, strapped to a chair, my hands bound to Harry's. "I'm sorry for suffocating you with a pillow." He didn't sound apologetic. "You asshole," I gritted out. He sighed, leaning his head on mine. "I said I was sorry." This time, we were inside a glass building. Above us, the sky was pitch dark. "Where are we?" "I have no idea," Harry muttered. "I've never been this far." My gaze followed an odd-looking bird through the skylight. "Meaning?" "Meaning, she always takes me back to the start," he said. "Graduation day." Harry got free easily, tearing himself from his restraints. The knots around my wrists were impossible. "So, you've been here before?" "No," he stumbled, trying to swipe himself down. "Isaac has." The boy dropped onto his hands and knees, picking up a single shard of glass. "Isaac said he found a room with a skylight," Harry murmured, sliding the point between his fingers. His gaze found the ceiling. Then he went deeper, and his consciousness never came back to us. Miss Benson sent a mindless copy in his place. He got to his feet, the shard clenched in his fist. "So, if I'm right, Isaac woke up, and Miss Benson must have restrained the real him." Harry stepped in front of me. "And like Isaac, we will wake up." His frenzied eyes found mine. "Right?" I wasn't thrilled with the idea of dying again, but anything to wake myself up. "Do it." He nodded, and I felt the prick of the blade spike my skin. "Wait." Harry stepped back, cocking his head. "What?" "Why would Miss Benson do this?" I demanded. "She didn't want us to graduate school, so she did all of this?" Harry shrugged, playing with the shard between his fingers. "Why else would she do this?" He pressed the shard into my neck. "Wait," I hissed out. Harry's frown was patient. "What now?" "What if this is the real world?" I whispered. "We'll be killing ourselves. For real." Harry's lips pricked slightly. "Does this world look real to you?" Before I could reply, he slashed my throat open. I waited for the reset, for the sensation of blankets wrapped around my head and my mother's voice. Instead, my body was stiff, my eyes glued shut. "Bonnie Haverford?" The voice was a low murmur. "Honey, can you hear me?" There was something stuck in my arm, a sharp, cruel thing pinning me down. I did say she was awake, but nobody believed me. The British accent was almost a melody. Prying my eyes open, a figure was looming over me. It was a woman with a kind face, her expression soothing. A paramedic. I couldn't make out what the tag on her uniform said, though. Around me, I could see my classmates, wrapped in blankets, being escorted to the door. There were 15 or so futuristic-looking pods, and I was lying in one, a plastic mask suffocating my mouth. Isaac stood next to the paramedic, a wary smile on his mouth. The guy had a scary bandage wrapped around his head. Bonnie, right? This version of him didn't remember getting to know me. Isaac pulled me to a sitting position, ignoring the paramedic's sharp hiss of, "Please leave her where she is." A man dressed in white tried to throw a blanket around him, and he shrugged it off. "I'm fine," Isaac muttered, gingerly prodding his head wound. "I won't be if you keep asking if I'm okay." Jeez. I like Isaac. Ignoring the adults, he wandered over to the pod in front of me and pulled a half-conscious Harry to his unsteady feet. Harry staggered, half-lidded eyes finding mine. His smile was sickly. It worked. The two of them hugged, Isaac burying his head in the crook of the boy's shoulder. I wanted to talk to Harry, but the paramedic seemed pretty insistent that I stayed still so she could check me over. I was barely aware of my surroundings when I was crawling into the back of an ambulance. Reality felt wrong, like I was still stuck, still reliving the same day over and over, but my town was real. I dazedly watched traffic flying by, the sky darkening. Time was moving forward again. The world resumed, and graduation day had been and gone. 14 days to be exact. Miss Benson had us trapped for 14 days, and yet to me, it felt like a century. Mom was at the station, immediately pulling me into a hug. She put me under house arrest for a week, sentencing me to my room. According to Mom, our teacher turned herself in. Apparently, forcing her students into a slasher movie simulator was tugging at her heart. I spent most of the summer lying in bed watching Disney movies. Mom made me breakfast, eggs and soldiers, just like when I was a little kid. I was absently dipping my toast, soldiers, in egg. When she dropped an envelope in front of me, "If you want to testify, sweetie," Mom had resorted to using her baby voice again. "But remember, you don't have to. It's your choice." Mom's voice faded when I picked up the envelope, opening it up. My name was printed on the front. I blinked. They printed my name upside down. Mom was behind me, frying more eggs. Huh? In the time it took for the envelope to slip from my hand, I was only aware of one thing. The woman in the black suit was standing in the doorway, her fingers wrapped around an axe. Harry was in front of me 1 minute, his eyes wide, lips parted in a scream. "It's not..." The woman was quick to grab him, one hand going over his mouth, the other pressing the blade into his Adam's apple. Real. In one singular jerking movement, the boy's blood was splattering my face, clouding my vision. The woman in the black suit did not kill me. She picked Harry up, threw him over her shoulder, and walked away. "Did you remember to thank me for buying your graduation dress?" Mom asked, handing me a plate of fried eggs. Her voice, though, felt too close. Warm breath tickling my cheeks. "Bonnie, are you listening to me? Did you remember to thank me, sweetheart?" Reality was far more cruel than dream. Reality was being unable to move, unable to breathe. It was like coming up for air, but at the same time, I was drowning. The real world was so cold, and yet warm wetness dripped down my chin. I was strapped to a metal table, something plastic lodged down my throat. Through blurry vision, I could see my body. I could see that my hair was so much longer, almost down to my stomach, but there was something wrong. Prickles of ice slithered down my spine, curls of panic setting my body into fight or flight. At first, I thought I was in the emergency room, except this place didn't have doors. The walls were sickly green, a bunker transformed into a sicko's dungeon. My body resembled a pincushion, or a little girl's idea of a doll. When my eyes found my stomach that was barely being held together by fresh stitches, my mind started to come apart. Harry was wrong. Everything that has happened to me, to us, was real. Being beheaded, ripped apart, sliced into, Miss Benson was just good at putting us back together. My arms were skeletal, wires protruding into my veins. I could see where I had been cut open, my paper-thin hospital gown stained scarlet. I couldn't count elephants. Across the room, beds lined the walls. One of them was what was left of my classmates, mangled flesh still strapped down. Some of them had been cut into, severed apart, while others were attached to tubes, wires sticking into their spine and the back of their heads. The floor was stained, writhing body parts and slithering entrails dried into yellowing tiles. In the corner of my eye, Mary's head was hanging open, the pinkish gray of her brain visible through the pearly white of her skull. She was still alive, still twitching in her restraints, plastic tubes full of fluid being fed directly into her head. When a thin river of red slid down her temple, I averted my gaze. Barf was already in my mouth, splashing into my mask. Annalise had tubes stuck to her, one eye scooped out, her pretty face mutilated. Isaac. He was covered with a white sheet, a startling smear of scarlet where his head was supposed to be. I could see his wrists still strapped down. Miss Benson stood in my line of vision, though I did see Isaac's fingers curl slightly. My teacher didn't speak when I shrieked through my mask, straining against Velcro straps. Miss Benson's smile was the one I used to like. She lit up our classroom like sunshine. "Why don't we count elephants together, huh?" I found myself nodding, trusting the sunshine smile. 1. Miss Benson straightened up. 2. She strode over to Harry's bed, replacing his blood-soaked pillow with a fresh one, adjusting the tube in his mouth and planting a kiss on his forehead. I could see the red dots marked across his skin, circled around his eyes. 3. I found myself saying with her, my thoughts dancing. Miss Benson turned to me, her lips breaking out into a grin, That's right, count with me, Bonnie. I closed my eyes, swimming in the drugs filling my body. I was being pulled back down. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Sinking through the ground, colors flashed in my eyes. Bonnie. Mom's voice startled me awake, a raw cry choking through my lips. Graduation day was the same. Mom made me breakfast, pancakes and orange juice. I went to school wearing my graduation dress. Isaac walked straight past me, running to catch up with his friends. Mary ignored my attempt to call out for her. Annalise ducked her head, hurrying to empty out her locker. Hello? Harry was standing behind me. I could have cried. But when I turned to talk to him, to tell him we were still trapped, his smile was wide, eyes glassy. In his arms was our yearbook. He handed me a pen. Do you mind signing it? Harry chuckled. I've got everyone but you. He opened it onto the first page. It's Harry, by the way. Behind him, I glimpsed a familiar shadow, a woman striding towards me. The lights above flickered, and I could already taste blood in my mouth. Harry didn't even flinch when I dropped the yearbook and stumbled into a run. His smile was vacant, empty. Just like he said, an NPC. I was already running for my life, and he kept talking to thin air. When the woman in the black suit sprinted past him, his smile broadened. And you are? This story also had a lot of non-humans in it, as they were NPCs, not to mention the woman in the black dress. I remember when I first read this story thinking of like Lady Dimitrescu whenever I read it, because they described it kind of like her. That's one of those stories that after I read it, it just kind of stuck with me. Anyways, we got a couple more stories with non-human things happening in them, so let's go ahead and get to it. This next one's from r/no-sleep from user Mr. Outlaw. I was paid to be a fake customer at a dying mall. Something strange is happening in there. So my life pretty much derailed back in spring 2022. This is when the downward spiral, so to speak, really began for me. Trust me, this is necessary context for the rest of this. I was at Buffalo Wild Wings, watching some UFC fights with some friends, and decided to cook up a harmless little parlay before the main card. I'd never gambled on anything before and only had this vague understanding of how it worked. But I had just passed some exams and was about 5 or 6 drinks deep, and the world just seemed so open and rife with possibilities, so I thought, why the hell not? I ended up turning $15 into over $200 that night, but based on the way I was acting, you would have thought I'd won 200 mil. The high was just that good, more visceral than I would have thought. I never reached that high ever again. Even after hitting ludicrous bets that paid out 50 to 60 times more, nothing really came close to replicating it. Which was really the crux of my issues. My dumbass just kept trying to chase it. As much as I'm sure you'd all love to hear it, I'm not going to go into a detailed timeline of my misery. Just know that it was bad. Probably worse than you're imagining right now. Bridges burned, legal trouble, having to avoid calls from very persistent debt collectors, the works. The only reason I've been able to somewhat keep my head above water for so long was due to my job. It was one of those positions that paid you a lot to sit around in an office and update a spreadsheet every now and then, maybe an hour of real work a day. I was lucky to land it, even luckier to be able to hang on to it for as long as I did. So when the consultants were hired and the fat started being trimmed, I really had no right to be as shocked as I was when I saw that notification from my manager waiting for me on Teams. I did end up with a pretty decent severance, and can you guess what I did with it? Well, I actually tripled it the following week, betting on golf of all things. Of course, I should have stopped right there and updated my LinkedIn, polished off my suit, registered for some networking events, but no, that wasn't going to work for me. In my head, no work meant more time to learn how to become a proficient gambler. Every night was spent diving into statistics, deep analytics, line movements, even sports psychology of all things. What's it called when you think you know a lot, but you really don't know shit? The Freddy Krueger effect? Something like that? Things were going all right for a while. Not great, but I was winning just enough that I was able to stomach it all. But then one night, I was completely coked out and decided to place a very large and stupid bet on a certain boxing match. It flopped hard. Then, in my desperation to recoup something, I cooked up another long shot parlay on some fights the following weekend. And I'm sure you can guess what happened. When I was laid off 4 months ago, I had a total of $45K in liquid savings and only $35K in debts. Across all my accounts now, I'm down to $27.50. As for the debts, I don't even know. I don't want to look. My cards are all maxed, my credit is shot. I can't talk to my family anymore. Friends are no longer my friends, and every day there are people who look like they enjoy breaking fingers standing outside of my apartment building. Sometimes they manage to make it in and knock furiously at my door, and I just have to pretend like I'm not there. By the time I finally came to my senses and began job searching again, I'd already dug a cavern for myself that was going to take some Herculean effort to scale out of. I did manage to get some interviews, but never made it to any second rounds. Maybe I was coming off as too strong out, I don't know. Side tangent, don't you hate it when they ask about gaps in your employment? It's like, screw off, man. Anyways, I haven't gotten an interview in a while, and things don't seem to be looking up there. A few days ago, the collectors actually tried physically breaking down my door. Got real close as well, until one of my neighbors, this old military type, came out and threatened to shoot their kneecaps off if they didn't skedaddle. I got lucky there. I can't bank on getting lucky again, though. Which leads me to last night. I was drunk off some bottom shelf vodka and decided to try some more shameful and unorthodox method of procuring funds. The method being using AI-generated sob stories to e-bag on Reddit. Side note, do people actually do that? Like, is that a thing? Yeah, look, I was desperate and wasn't thinking straight, I know. Of course, I wasn't sure how much I'd be able to get out of it. Certainly not enough to put a tiny dent in the total debt, but maybe just enough to get the collectors off my back. For a while, and what more could I lose from trying? I still had the wherewithal to at least edit out most of the ChatGPT speak in the post before copying and pasting them to as many relevant subreddits as possible. Predictably, I got called out almost immediately, getting blocked from one community after another, but just when I was ready to give up, somebody shot me a message. I'll paste it below. Hey there, my name's Scott. I saw your post in blank. That really sucks, man. Really it does. I've been there and I think I can help. Now, I can't just give you money straight up because I don't have much myself, but I can offer you a quick and reasonably trouble-free way to get some. Nothing weird or illegal, so don't worry about that. I have a friend who's head of a property group that owns a mall. You said you live in blank, right? The mall's located in blank, so it shouldn't be too far of a drive. In any case, you'll be compensated for fuel. So here's the crux of the proposal. You see, the mall's not doing too well. These days, I think most malls aren't, but the location for this one is just so awful that it's doing worse than the rest of them. But for whatever reason, this guy isn't quite ready to let go of it. It's not that he even really cares about it being profitable, he just doesn't want it to get shut down and repurposed for something else. For whatever the reason. You know how weird rich people can be? Have you ever heard about mystery shoppers? It's not as eerie as it sounds. They're just people who are hired to walk around malls and shopping centers pretending to be customers. That's basically what he's recruiting for. To make it look like the place still has some juice left in it, so that he can delay the inevitable for as long as he can. Again, for what? I don't know. You'll be given a certain window of time in which you're meant to walk around, doing your best to pretend like you actually have a reason for being there, which would involve some shopping, looking around, having a meal in the food court, etc. Once you enter the building, you'll go up to the Starbucks on the second floor. Go up to the barista and tell her that you're a part of the program, and she'll give you $100 cash. You can then go ahead and spend that $100 on whatever you'd like over the course of the time you're in there. Make sure you spend all of it. Don't try and keep it. They'll know. Once your time is up, you can simply leave, but don't try and leave early. Once again, they'll know. In order to receive compensation, you'll need to be in there for your entire allotted duration. You can stay longer if you'd like, but not a second less. I mean that literally, not even a second. Compensation is as follows: $250 for each hour spent there, to be e-transferred immediately upon your departure. If my friend likes your performance, there will be opportunity for you to come back. Let me know if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, and then I'll send you over some more details. Cheers. Okay, so clearly a joke, right? I'm being trolled. But then I tried to think about what the punchline possibly could have been and couldn't come up with anything. So I pivoted to the idea that maybe it was a scam, or maybe even more nefarious than that. The setup tracked well enough: lure people out to somewhere remote under the pretense that they're about to make some good money, but not such good money that it seems like a glaring trap. $250 an hour for walking around a mall is just skirting that edge, in my opinion. But what the hell are they planning to do once I get there? Mug me? They know I'm broke as shit and don't have anything, so that can't be it. So what else do I have that's valuable? My organs? Maybe they'll kidnap me and torture me to death on the dark web? I think the reason I'm typing this all out is because I'm hoping when I read it back, something will click. That I'll be able to come to my senses and realize just how bad an idea it is. Because right now, against all logic, I'm genuinely considering it. Because those assholes are pounding on my door again. This time, they knocked for like 20 minutes straight. It got intense enough that I really thought they were going to give another go at breaking it down, but they didn't. Lucky me. I've thought about spending less time here, so that if they ever do storm in, I won't have to make a break for the fire exit. But I don't know where I'd go. Maybe the library or the gym. Though if it ever comes to a point where I'm having to do all that, it's basically already over for me. There's no way to live. Trying to weigh everything now. Do I have anything to lose besides my life? Could things get worse than they are right now? One of the people I owe money to is a guy named Renzo. I met Renzo at a bar while I was watching the Canelo vs. Crawford card. What was that, like 9 months ago? Jesus. So anyways, I met this guy there and I was blitzed out of my head and told him very confidently to bet the house on Crawford. He seemed to like the cut of my jib, so he went ahead and did so. Not quite the house, but a pretty fat stack. I made him some good money that night. Made some good money myself. Then we just drank and drank until things got hazy, and the only other thing I really remember before waking up in his apartment the next morning, not what you think, was my face being pressed down into cold concrete. My clothes were still on, phone and wallet still in my pockets, and I was just slumped over on a couch with one side of my face stinging so bad it felt like something was pulsating beneath it. Looking at myself using the camera on my phone, I could see that half of my face was red and swollen, scratches overlapping each other like a bloody lattice. Then Renzo comes into the living room saying he couldn't believe what I did last night and how much of a dog I was. I didn't know what he was referring to, and I still don't. I never asked. So that's how I met the guy. I'd later find out that he traffics a lot of cocaine over the border and does a lot of it himself. And that there's a small jar sitting next to his TV containing several shriveled, dried up human ears that he claims used to belong to members of some outlaw gang in the Old West. I'm sure a reasonable person would have considered these things very carefully and concluded that they might be better off keeping their distance, but not me. In fact, I did the worst thing anybody could have possibly done. I ended up borrowing some money from him. Only around $3K, maybe not a lot to some of you, but when you're dealing with this guy, it's still $3K too much. To be fair though, he was the one that had offered it up. Told me to throw it on whatever I thought might get some coin, and if I won, we could share the profits. I guess he was under the impression that I was some sort of master sports bettor and that I knew what the hell I was doing. I should have asked him what would happen if I'd lost before I accepted it. And I did lose. All of it. Couldn't pay him back even a cent. I didn't hide it from him, just told him the facts straight and clear. To which he smiled, told me it was all right, that I had a week to pay him back. That week turned into a month, then 2 months, then I just started flat out avoiding him. Wasn't picking up his calls, being very careful to scan my surroundings for any sign of him whenever I was out. Eventually, I guess he snapped and sent his goons after me, and now here we are. The reason I bring Renzo up is because he's the most pressing issue in my life right now. The guy's clearly not going away, and if I don't placate him soon, something very bad is going to happen, and I'm not going to be able to run from it. I just gave him a call, apologized for ducking him, and then asked him plainly how much money I'd need to give him at this point to square everything up, for him to call off his goons and leave me be. He told me $10K, and if I didn't give it to him by Tuesday next week, he'd come up to my apartment himself and blast the door off its hinges. And that I could try leaving the city or getting the police involved, but that it wouldn't matter because eventually he would get me. And once he did, he'd skin me alive before tossing me into a vat of boiling oil. I told him okay, to meet me at the bar next Tuesday at noon and that I'd have the money. Then I hung up. Now I'm really panicking. I mean, I doubt the guy has access to a vat of boiling oil large enough to toss a body into, but I kinda believe him about the skinning alive part. $10K divided by $250 is 40 hours. I have about 170 hours before I have to meet him. I just messaged Scott back, telling him I was very much interested in the mall thing. Let's see what he says. It didn't take long for Scott to get back to me. He said he was glad to hear it, then asked when I could start. I told him immediately. Then I asked him how many hours he could get me before Tuesday. He told me he could maybe swing 35. I told him I really needed 40, and was there any way we could make that happen? He said no, 35 was a hard limit, but that he could probably vouch for me and get my rate up to $265 an hour. Then I tried pushing for $285, claiming that'd be the minimum I'd need in order to stave off eviction, basically trying to guilt him into it. It was a long back and forth, but eventually we were able to come to a mutual agreement. He then sent me an address and told me to be there from exactly 2 to 9 tomorrow. I told him I appreciated it and sent him the details he'd asked for, which was just my name, age, phone number, and email. And that's it. No address, work history, social security number, literally anything else. They didn't even ask for a picture of my ID. Which was convenient, but also very sketchy. I mean, I could have been a literal bot, and how would he know? So many red flags that you could supply a parade with them. But it's not like I really have the luxury of backing out at this point. Maybe I could try leaving town, but I don't think I'd get too far. I don't think it'd end well. I told him I'd be there. A few hours later, he sent me another message, via email this time. Hey, it's Scott. Please remember this before you go. It's really important that you do your best to act like a real customer. From the moment you step inside to the moment you leave. If anybody comes up to you and asks what you're doing, tell them you're shopping or going to see a movie or grabbing lunch or just killing some time. Have a response ready and deliver it clearly and confidently. Absolutely no acting like a deer in headlights. Just be calm, be natural, don't think about it too much. And while you're in there, don't ask any questions of your own. You see or hear something weird, just ignore it. But if you ever feel like you're in genuine danger, don't hesitate to leave. You'll be paid in full for the day. Should any incidents transpire, please let me know. Tell me exactly what happened and I'll relay it to my friend. He likes to keep tabs on that sort of stuff. Also, one more thing I should have mentioned at the start. Try to keep what you see in there to yourself. Try not to talk about it too much, but if you do, because I know you probably will, just make sure to leave out the specifics. I know it sounds contradictory, but my friend would rather keep everything contained here. Good luck, man. Rooting for you. So yeah, not sure what to make of that, but I'm trying not to think about it. I thought about sending Scott another message, asking what kind of danger I could possibly expect, but screw it. Don't bite the hand that feeds you or something. It's late now, and I'm watching Breaking Bad for the 4th time, and I have about 8 hours before I need to be at the mall. I really should get some sleep, make sure I'm mentally sharp for tomorrow, but my heart's beating pretty fast, and I get the sense that rest won't come easy right now. I looked up the address, and it does seem to be a real, active place with real reviews. Nothing glaringly off about it other than the location. It's about a 25-minute drive from my apartment, and it's pretty out of the way, not very accessible. I think I have just enough left in my account to fill up my tank with just enough gas to get me there and back. Then that's it. So if this does turn out to be some stupid joke, then I'm really screwed tight. I'm done for. But I'll be screwed tight if I show up or not, and even if it is a trap and I show up and immediately get shot in the head or kidnapped and tortured, well, at least that means I won't have to deal with a lot of annoying shit in the future. Framing it that way, it really is a win-win-win, and I'm starting to feel better about it all. This guy's an optimist. I love it. I'm sitting in my car right now, and I'm feeling oddly mellow, more than I have in a long time. Could be a defense mechanism, my psyche trying to brace me for the unknown. Could also be the vodka Red Bull concoction I just finished chugging. Whatever it is, I'll take it. The parking lot here is larger than I'd expect, and about a fifth of the way full, which is surprising to me, given the location. It might be a stretch to call it in the middle of nowhere, but just based on a cursory glance, you could make a case for it. No other buildings around, no other signs of life at all, just a desolate stretch of highway on one side and a dense forest on the other. It's about 10 minutes out of the city, smack dab between some gray industrial area and a long stretch of farmland. I can't fathom what the target demographic was here. It's about 10 before 2. A lot of thoughts running through my head, but I'm doing a good job of stamping most of them out. In another 5 minutes, I'll head in. It's just after 8 now, and I'm sitting in the food court, sipping on the remnants of a milkshake. Not so mellow anymore. It's been strange here, real bizarre, and I'm still trying to process it. When I'd first entered, which I made sure to do it exactly too, I'd followed Scott's instructions and immediately headed up to the second floor. Looking around the place, it seemed typical enough. There was the usual fare: H&M, Foot Locker, Bath & Body Works, Sephora, candy shops, stores selling cute but useless toys and knickknacks. Not quite bustling with activity anywhere, but also not empty enough for it to feel eerie. Though it feels really weird knowing that everybody you pass by is likely there for the same messed up reason you are. So I've been trying to avoid making any eye contact. I spent a lot of time searching around for the Starbucks and eventually found it tucked away in some corner, all the way at the end of a long string of dead and vacant storefronts. Almost like they'd made some concerted effort to hide it, or maybe it was just a coincidence? Don't want to get too conspiratorial yet. I walked inside, and the only person in there other than the barista was this dude sitting at a table with a half-eaten sandwich in front of him. He didn't look up or really register my presence at all, just kept staring blankly ahead at something. I don't know what, couldn't figure it out. Maybe the painting of abstract shapes on the wall? I went up to the barista, who had short blonde hair and looked to be in her 20s. I offered up with a smile, which wasn't reciprocated, not that I really cared. What did catch me off guard was the look on her face, like I was the scourge of the earth or something. Like I'd just murdered 10 puppies in front of her and then laughed about it. I was so puzzled by this that my train of thought completely derailed for a second, and I forgot what I was supposed to say. After stumbling through several half-baked sentences, it finally came back to me, and I spat it out. I'm, part of the program. She sighed and actually rolled her eyes before asking me what I wanted to order. I just stared at her, no clue what to say, probably looking bewildered. I told her again that I was a part of the program. She shook her head, sighed again. You're supposed to buy something first, she told me, keeping her voice really low while staring daggers at me. They didn't tell you? I shook my head and told her no, they didn't. You're supposed to buy something and hand me some cash, and then I give you the change. Get it? I remembered starting to get lightheaded there. Thinking, was this real? Was I dreaming? So order something and then give me some cash, she went on. Doesn't matter how much, just give me something. I told her I'd have a black coffee and began digging through my wallet, surprised and relieved to find a crumpled $1 bill in there. I took it out and handed it to her. She snatched it quickly out of my hand and dumped in the register, then gave me back a small stack crisp of $10 bills. I counted them quickly, 10 total. I turned around, getting ready to leave, but then she called me back, asking did I forget about something. I stopped, turned around, and she went about making the coffee. Her movement slow, almost labored. I noticed that she was walking with a limp. It took her a few minutes to finish up, and then she held out the cup, giving me one last glare as I grabbed it from her. I'd never been more glad to be leaving a Starbucks. Like I said, really bizarre stuff, but as I'd come to find out, this was only the tip of the iceberg. I took a sip of the coffee, and it tasted burnt to hell, just completely god-awful, so I tossed it, and made my way over to one of those mall directory things. Still had a lot of time to kill, so I began perusing the options. Eventually, I settled on heading over to the Chili's, having a margarita or 2 or 3. Yes, I have problems. I went back down to the first floor, keeping my vision squared ahead, trying not to draw any attention to myself. At one point, I walked past a woman that looked to be in her early 60s, late 70s, and I had to wonder, was she here for the money as well, or did she just happen upon this place of her own volition? I almost wanted to ask her directly, but thought better of it. Arriving at the Chili's, I headed straight for the bar and was surprised to find most of the seats there occupied. Most lively place I'd seen in the mall by far, though there wasn't a soul at any of the tables. It was a mixed group. Men, women, some old, some young, all seeming pretty drunk and glaring at me malevolently, as if I were intruding on something sacred. Well, I thought, this was just the way it was going to be. I tried not to take it too personally. I took a seat at the end of the bar, trying and failing to catch the bartender's attention. It was a youngish guy, maybe early 30s, big beard and pencil-thin arms covered in tattoos. I think it took about 5 full minutes before he finally, reluctantly looked my way. He started to walk towards me, moving real slow as if trying to draw out the steps. "Yeah?" is all he said to me, his tone oozing with cold contempt. I told him that I'd have a margarita, along with a Budweiser. For a while, he continued to stare at me, his expression implying that I'd crossed some sort of line by asking to be served alcohol at a bar at Chili's. Then he took a deep breath through his nose and turned away, walked over to the liquor shelf. I watched him as he dumped some tequila into a glass, threw a lime wedge in it, topped it off with a messy splash of Sprite, spilling most of it onto the counter. Then he walked back over, set it down roughly in front of me, and walked away again. He didn't bother with the Budweiser, and I didn't bother pressing him for it. More trouble than it was worth, I reckoned. I sat there and sipped my drink slowly, watching CNN on the television, but not really paying attention to it. It was hard to focus on anything at all when you could just feel that every single pair of eyes in the room was stuck onto you like glue. That you were the center of attention for reasons that were probably not so good. I finished the drink and felt like I needed one more to get a tolerable buzz going. Tried to get the bartender's attention again, but this time he just straight up ignored me. Just kept facing ahead while leaning against the back shelf, taking swigs out of a Smirnoff bottle before putting it back, lightly swaying on his feet. The guy was plastered. At a point, it starts to become a blow to your ego, and this was about to that point. I began shouting at him, something like, "Come on, man, can a guy not get a drink?" Maybe, probably, with a bit of an edge in my voice. He still wouldn't look at me. I looked down at the rest of the bar, and suddenly nobody else was looking at me either. It's like the entire room had suddenly and collectively agreed to pretend like I no longer existed. "What the hell is wrong with you people?" I shouted. "Nothing against you, buddy," somebody I couldn't see who shouted back. "There's just too many people in here right now." I asked out loud what the hell was that supposed to mean. "It's 5 o'clock on a Tuesday," the bartender spoke up, his tone implying that he was explaining something painfully obvious. "Think about it, yeah? How busy can a Chili's get on a Tuesday at 5 o'clock? Just think about it. If we don't sell this, then nobody gets paid. So quit your whining and come back when it's emptier." Any further questions of mine fell on deaf ears. I was invisible again. I slapped one of the $10 bills onto the counter and stood up and left the place. For the next few hours, I sorta just wandered around, my head in a bit of a daze, still not fully convinced that this wasn't a dream. I went over to the food court, ate some KFC. The The guy working the counter there didn't say a word to me, communicating via nothing but head nods. Then, when I bit into the chicken, I realized that some of it was still raw. I just ate around it. After that, I went over to the Under Armour store, spent some time looking over some knockoff jackets. The labels read Under Armour, that nevertheless seemed comparable in quality to the real thing. I picked one of them up, along with a t-shirt. Surprisingly, the lady who worked there was actually pretty nice. Actually put some effort into being an employee. Or maybe she was a real employee? After that, I was down to just $20 and went over to the movie theater, which was completely empty. Except for a woman who was asleep behind the box office and some guy sweeping the floors. The screen that was supposed to be displaying what was playing was glitched, completely bugging out, so I went up to the guy and asked him what was on. He just shrugged, said that it could be anything. Then I asked how I was supposed to buy a ticket, and he said all I needed to do was go up to the box office and put a $10 bill on the counter, then I could go into any of the theaters. But to try and not wake Lindsay up, since she gets real cranky when that happens, and he doesn't want to deal with it. I parted ways with another bill, then went into the closest theater, catching about 2/3 of that last Avatar movie, the one with the fire in it. There was only one other person in the theater, sitting near the front. They were there when I'd walked in, and they didn't move after the film had finished. I left the theater and went into a washroom, took a piss, splashed my face with cold water while looking at myself in the mirror, taking deep breaths. Now, the anxiety was starting to break through. The fear as well. After I'd finished drying myself, the stall closest to the wall opened up. I looked over, seeing the door hanging ajar, but nobody emerging from behind it. Through the gap at the bottom, I could see a pair of dirty white sneakers. I guess whoever they belonged to was just standing there, which was a really freaky thing to think about. And I left the washroom shortly after, looking over my shoulder to make sure nobody tried to follow me out, and nobody did. There were a few more odd occurrences after this. I walked past an electronics store and this short, older dude came out from behind the counter with this big smile on his face and tried gesturing for me to come inside. Cell phone, he kept saying. Fix cell phone. I told him my cell phone didn't need any fixing, and his expression dropped like a stone in a lake. I watched him as he walked back into the store and rolled down the security gates and disappeared behind them. Then the lights went off inside. There was also this lady walking around with a metal tray, claiming to be offering samples of cinnamon rolls. The cinnamon rolls in question being dollops of thick, gray, bubbling sludge. Safe to say, I passed on it. At some point, I had what I believe was a panic attack. Never had one before, but I think this was it. Tightness in the chest, an overwhelming sense of dread. I found a bench somewhere and took a seat. Pulled up some breathing exercises on YouTube and tried to replicate them. To my surprise, they worked pretty well. I went back to the food court, spending my last $10 on a large peanut butter milkshake from Baskin-Robbins with a bunch of chocolate BS blended into it. And that's where I am now, just sitting here, waiting for 9 to hit so I can get the hell out of whatever the hell this place is. But I'm feeling better now, I think. Maybe it's just the dopamine from all the sugar, but I'm feeling alright. Enough that I think I'll be able to get through this. Oh shit, there's a guy walking towards me now. He just sat down beside me. The good news is, I'm back in my apartment now, mostly unscathed. The not so good news is that, as much as I need the money, I'm not sure I can go back to that place. So, about the guy in the food court. He was young, maybe early 20s, tall and skinny, brown hair cut into a short fade, looked like a bog standard college kid. He sat next to me, started making small talk, asking how my day had been, was the milkshake good, etc. I tried ignoring him at first, but he seemed nice and normal and coherent enough that I started to feel bad about it. So we got to talking a bit. He told me his name was Daniel and that he used to be a copywriter, but got laid off around 6 months ago and hasn't been able to find anything since. So that's what he was doing here. What about you? He then asked. Why are you here? Right at that moment, I felt comfortable enough to tell him the truth. I told him about the gambling, the debts, the collectors. It felt nice and cathartic airing out my dirty laundry to a complete stranger, so I just kept on going. I didn't stop talking until my eyes drifted down and landed on the shoes he was wearing. These really worn, scuffed white sneakers. Okay, I thought, could be a coincidence, and even if it was the same guy from the bathroom, then so what? But then I remembered Scott's message, specifically his instructions about what I was supposed to do if somebody tried talking to me, and then the realization washed over me like a cold wave. I suddenly stood up, told him I had to get going. He started protesting, telling me that I should stick around because he had something he wanted to show me. I told him I was tired and I really needed to get home. He started grinning, showing off blocky, chiclet teeth, really stretching his lips as wide as they could go, and then a bit wider than that, looking really uncanny. He asked me again what I was doing here. Shopping, I told him, just shopping. He pointed out that I didn't have any bags, so what could I have been shopping for? I started scanning the floor around me before remembering that I'd left the Under Armour bag in the washroom. He started laughing in this jovial manner, though there was something clearly ominous beneath it. "You're not here to shop, are you?" he asked. "Then what? Why are you here?" I snuck a glance at my phone and saw 8:50. I repeated that I really had to leave, and then I turned around, started heading for the exit. To my dismay, I could hear his steps keeping pace behind me. Once I got to the doors, I checked the time again. 8:55. I turned, and Daniel, or whoever the hell he was still there, standing about a half dozen feet away. "Don't you have to go home?" he questioned, holding on to that grin. "Door's right there. Why don't you leave?" By now, I was checking my phone every few seconds, no longer making an attempt to hide it. He laughed again, said that if I wasn't going home, I may as well come and see what he wants to show me. Now, the panic had returned, and I really had to force myself to stay put for just a few more minutes. Minutes that seemed to be stretching into infinity, but I told myself that I was ready to sprint the second he tried making a move. I started wondering who I was more scared of, Renzo or this guy right in front of me. It came up inconclusive. As the seconds ticked down, he continued goading me to come with him, each request insinuating more of a threat than the last. The grin slowly fading, twisting into something more outwardly malicious. The moment that clock hit 9, I tried to bolt, though I didn't get far. The bastard grabbed onto my collar and started dragging me back. I tried yanking myself away, but the freak had this inexplicable iron grip. It was nothing but luck that I had been wearing one of my old, cheap shirts, the fabric of which was already starting to tear. I jerked myself forward a few more times until it shredded off my back. Once free, I lunged ahead and pushed the door open, vaulting myself outside and tripping over my own feet, elbows planting hard onto the concrete. A searing pain jolted up my arms, and I think I heard something crack, but I wasn't too worried about it in the moment. More concerned about making sure Daniel wasn't about to drag me back inside. I scrambled to my feet and spun around to face the doors, bracing myself for, well, I don't know what. Maybe for him to be charging towards me like a bull. Which he wasn't. He remained inside, his face now pressed up against the glass, features pancaked into this odd, grotesque visage. Staring at me with wide, bulging eyes, relentlessly dragging his tongue across the glass in a circular pattern. Like he'd suddenly forgot how to act like a human, or maybe he just didn't care anymore. No longer felt the need to keep up the front. I just stood there and stared back, convinced that the second I tried to move, he would do the same. I'm not sure how long this little stalemate of ours went on for, but I remember my heart racing the entire time, beating faster and faster, approaching a point where I thought it might just explode. But eventually, he did leave, detached his face from the glass and spun around and just walked off. I doubled over, puked up some bile, and took several deep breaths before walking over to my car, cold and shirtless, watching the sun dip into the horizon. I wasn't expecting to find that my tires had all been slashed, all 4 of them. My stomach dropped, then it dropped even further once I looked around and saw that my car was now literally the only one in the entire lot. I tried calling for an Uber, but the network out there was so bad that the app wouldn't load. I could have gone back into the mall and used the Wi-Fi, but screw that. I just leaned on the hood of my car, mulling over my options, feeling a bit numb. My apartment was about 18 miles away, theoretically walkable, but the bigger problem was I really didn't know the way. There was a good chance that if I tried walking, I'd end up in the next town over, especially in the dark, which was something I thankfully didn't have to risk. A few minutes later, the front door swung open and out came a woman, maybe in her 30s, dressed in jeans and a windbreaker. She didn't seem at all too dangerous, but my expectations were up in the air at that point, so I backed away regardless. She walked halfway across the lot before stopping, looking over at me. It seemed like she was about to say something, but then hesitated, looking away for a second before looking back. Then she called out, asking if I needed a ride. I told her I'd love one, but could she first prove to me that she wasn't with the maniac that I just escaped from? She said she wasn't with him, but that she didn't know how she was supposed to prove that to me, and that she wasn't going to wait around, so if I wanted a ride, I should make that decision soon. I shivered. It was starting to get cold out. She never questioned why I was shirtless. I then asked where her car was. She told me to follow her, but not before flashing the Glock attached to her hip. She said she didn't think I was a threat, but that she absolutely would not hesitate to shoot if I tried anything. And I assured her that I wasn't going to try anything. She'd parked about a half-mile away from the mall, on a dirt patch in the forest, well hidden from the road. I asked her why she had parked all the way out there and not in the lot. She told me that the first time she'd left her car in the lot after 8 p.m., her tires had gotten slashed. I then asked her how long she's been working at the mall. She said she didn't really want to talk about it, that she'd prefer if we just sat in silence for the duration of the trip. So we did. Once we were in the city, she dropped me off at a train station. I didn't have any cash for a ticket, but I was pretty close to my apartment, only about a 10-minute walk away. I thanked her and hopped out. Before she took off, I asked her what her name was. She just shook her head and said it'd be pointless for me to know. When I got home, I drained the rest of the vodka in my fridge and passed out on my couch. When I woke up this morning, I checked my phone and saw a notification from my bank. I'd been e-transferred $3,000. I also had another email from Scott. Hey man, I heard you might have had a rough first day, so I sent you a bit extra on top of the promised amount. Your hours are the same for today, 2 to 9 p.m. And also, man, just remember what I said before. You're a customer in there, so act like it. It's about 10:30 a.m. right now, and I'm just lying on the couch, sipping some Clamato juice, not really wanting to move, especially not to go back to that place. I spent some time trying to calculate how far $3,000 could get me if I skipped town and concluded probably not very far. Then I tried conjuring up some other ways I might be able to cover the last $7,000 before asking myself who I was kidding. I really don't want to go back there, but I know I'll probably have to. Whenever I originally read this story, I remember just being kind of angry because this guy showed up to this mall and literally just did everything they told him not to do. Like, come on, our guy fumbled the bag. The next one's from r/NoSleep from user HorrorJunkie123. My husband cheated on me. Ever since I found out, he's been acting different. Justin and I had been together for 10 years, married for 6. I'd been with him for my whole adult life. We'd been dating since I was 17 and he was 18. I always thought he was my soulmate, the man I wanted to grow old with. Turns out, I was wrong. I was devastated when I found out. Yes, Justin had been staying out later than usual, and his explanations were usually flimsy at best. I'm not stupid. I had my suspicions, but I think I just really didn't want to come to terms with the fact that my husband was seeing another woman. Honestly, I might have gone years without discovering the truth, but Justin got sloppy. Welcome home, honey. Fun night out with the guys after work again? Uh-huh, Justin grumbled, pushing past me. I made dinner if you're hungry. Beef tips and rice. I know it's one of your favorites. Ate at the bar. I'm going to bed. he muttered, steadying himself against the wall before woozily clomping up the stairs. My heart sank. Nights like those were becoming more and more frequent. I loved my husband. All I wanted was to spend a little quality time with him after a long day at work, but he couldn't even spare me a few minutes. I glanced up at him as he lumbered up the steps, a tear trickling down my cheek. In an instant, any sadness that I felt was replaced by burning rage, because when Justin passed underneath the overhead light, I saw what appeared to be a hickey on the side of his neck. A cocktail of emotions swirled within me. Despair, resentment, betrayal, they all hit me like a ton of bricks. I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. I mean, who would? The man I had been head over heels for all that time had stabbed me in the back. I was in disbelief. I stumbled to the kitchen, pulling out a chair before I could collapse. I stared into space, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. I sat there for a long time, deep in thought. After a while, I felt numb, like my entire personality had been flushed down the drain, leaving nothing but an empty husk. Then a thought flashed across my mind. I'd been mistaken. That had to be it. Just a mere trick of the light. It was a pretty dimly lit hallway after all. Whatever the case, I had to know. I tiptoed upstairs, abandoning my dinner. I crept up to our room as quiet as a church mouse before lightly pushing open the bedroom door. Justin was fast asleep. I didn't waste any time. I rushed across the room, careful to avoid any squeaky floorboards, and I inspected Justin's neck. His snores grew louder as I approached. He always was a heavy sleeper. I cursed when I got a closer look. Justin was sleeping on his side, and I was not going to try to roll him over. I glanced around, searching for anything that might provide concrete evidence. My eyes fell to the bedside table. Bingo. I snatched Justin's phone from its charger. I held my breath as I pressed his meaty thumb under the screen to unlock it. I grinned, feeling a rush of exhilaration as I achieved my goal. What, huh? I froze. Justin groggily opened his eyes a sliver as my hand hovered over him. My blood turned to ice, and I prayed with all my might that my husband would just go back to sleep. To my immense shock, my prayers were answered. Justin mumbled incoherently under his breath before grabbing a fistful of covers and nodding off. I'd escaped by the skin of my teeth. I had to be more careful. The first thing I did was check Justin's texts. I immediately saw a woman's name I didn't recognize. My heart shattered when I read the messages. Hey, last night was incredible. See you again after work today? You're damn right. I wish you never had to leave. What about that wife of yours, though? Won't she get suspicious? Her? Not a chance. Even if she does find out, she won't leave. I could do anything, and she'd still think I was a saint. A deep-seated rage bubbled within me. Did Justin really think that little of me? He clearly saw me as nothing more than a spineless, codependent pushover. Well, I'd show him. I screenshotted the evidence, scrolling through dozens of nude photos that I hadn't taken, and sent everything to my number. I deleted any proof of my snooping, then replaced Justin's phone on the charger. I stormed out of the room, grabbing my keys as I went. I made it halfway across the living room when the realization hit me. I had nowhere to go. All my family lived 7 hours away. It was too late to book a decent hotel, and I really didn't want to drag any of my friends into my drama. Not yet, at least. That left me with one option. I had to sleep on the couch. I plopped down onto the sofa and sighed. I didn't want to have to confront it, but I knew what I had to do. In the morning, I was going to find a lawyer and start the divorce process. The thought alone was enough to break me. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I cried like a baby, silently sobbing into a scratchy pillow for what must have been hours. My eyes were puffy by the time I was done. I couldn't fathom falling asleep in a state like that, but I must have at some point. Because the next thing I remember, sunlight was flooding through the blinds. Morning, babe, how'd you... The rest of the sentence caught in my throat. That was right. Justin and I were about to be over. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, tears stinging at the corners of my vision. I opened up the text I'd sent myself as proof that the past 12 hours hadn't been some twisted nightmare, but the messages were gone. My eyes grew wide as I stared at the screen. That couldn't be right. They had been there, clear as day, the night before. Something wasn't adding up. I suddenly paused, bolting upright. Was that breakfast? The tantalizing aroma of eggs and bacon wafted around the corner from the kitchen. My brows furrowed. Justin never cooked. My breathing was shallow as I tentatively shuffled toward the kitchen. Curiosity gnawed at me like a piranha. I apprehensively peeked around the corner, unsure of what I would find. To my shock, there was my husband, humming a little tune while flipping pancakes. I rubbed my eyes. Was I seeing things? Surely I was delusional from lack of sleep. That had to have been it. Then Justin turned, his icy blue eyes locking onto mine. "Morning, princess. I hope you're hungry. I saw you sleeping on the couch, and I thought you might not be feeling well, so I decided to make you a hot meal to help you get better." My heart skipped a beat. Was this really my husband? It looked like him, sounded like him too. Still, I was weary. Yeah, just feeling a little under the weather is all. Are you feeling okay? You're acting different." "Never been better. Honestly, I think I've really turned a new leaf," he said, placing a steaming plate before me. "The old Justin is kaput. From now on, I swear, I'm going to be the best husband I can be." Our gazes connected, and I searched his expression for answers. He seemed genuine. If this was an act, it was a damn good one. "Thanks, that really makes me happy to hear." Justin beamed at me, the warmth of his smile seeping into my heart. It had been years since he looked at me like that. "Well, get used to it, because I'm keeping my word. I love you, Lydia." I wanted to be suspicious. I wanted to remain silent. I wanted to keep my guard up, but how could I? All I needed was love and attention, and I was finally getting it. For the first time in a long time, it felt like my husband actually cared. A big part of me was still leery of my husband. His timing was pretty convenient after all, but even with all my doubts, Justin was seemingly sticking to his promise. He took me out on dates, paid to get my nails done, brought me flowers. He even started shouldering most of the housework. Needless to say, I was impressed. If he would have kept that up, I might have never suspected a thing, but one night, he slipped up. We were cuddled up on the couch watching The Truman Show when I asked. Now, I wish I would have kept my mouth shut. "Hey, babe?" "Yes, my love," Justin asked, his eyes still glued to the screen. "If someone close to you was an imposter, like a perfect replica except for a few tiny changes, do you think you'd notice?" Justin tensed up, his eyes wide as he slowly turned to face me. A blank stare had overtaken his expression. A chill rippled through my body when he looked at me like that. He was beginning to frighten me. "I suppose so. Why do you ask?" His voice was monotone, dripping with a tinge of urgency. I didn't know how to process this sudden shift in personality. "It's the premise of the movie we're watching." I watched as the color seeped back into his face, and he loosened up, breathing a sigh of relief. I cocked a curious brow. Why was he acting so strange? That makes sense. We sat there in uncomfortable silence, shifting our attention back to the TV screen. After a few more tense moments, I couldn't take it anymore. "I've got to use the restroom and charge my phone. I'll be right back. No need to pause the movie for me." Justin nodded before grinning up at me. His smile. Had his teeth always been that straight? "Okay, hurry back. Wouldn't want your spot to get cold." "Yeah, sure thing." I practically bolted up the stairs, locking myself in our room. I slumped against the door, trying to steady my palpitating heart. What was going on? Was it just me, or was that some seriously freaky behavior? Either way, I needed a second to calm down. I had my eyes shut, focusing on my breathing when I heard it. My phone was buzzing from inside my pocket. I hurriedly retrieved it, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. I normally don't answer calls from strangers, but something compelled me. Maybe it was intuition, or perhaps I just wanted to talk to anyone other than my husband. In the end, I accepted the call. Hello? Lydia? Lydia Atkins? Speaking. Look, this is gonna sound crazy, but I need you to hear what I have to say. Okay. I suddenly jolted up from my spot on the floor and stared at the locked door separating me from the hallway. Loud knocks rattled its frame. Lydia, who are you speaking to? Panic surged through me as I scrambled for an answer. It's my mom. Go back downstairs. I'll be there in a minute. That was him, wasn't it? The caller said. That was my husband, yes. Why do you ask? I whispered, putting as much distance between myself and the door as possible. Lydia, I need you to hear me out. Can you promise me that you will? The pounding on the opposite side of the room grew even louder. Lydia, don't listen to her. She's a liar. My stomach began to twist itself into knots. How did he know? I'm listening. I'll hear what you have to say. The woman on the other end of the line breathed an audible sigh of relief. Okay, my name is Adeline, and Justin and I have been seeing each other for about 9 months. That man in your house is not your husband. My blood turned to ice, and I began to tremble. No, that couldn't be true. In a shaky voice, I asked the question that will haunt me until I die. How do I know you're telling the truth? There was a long pause, the bangs outside my door reaching a nauseating crescendo. When Adeline answered, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was in serious danger. Lydia, for the past week, Justin has been living with me. Okay, so that was part one, and honestly at this point, I have absolutely no clue who this could be. So let's read some more and let's figure that out together. This definitely has me on the edge of my seat though. Adeline, if that's not my husband, then who is it? I tried to be calm, to think rationally, but Adeline must have picked up on the fear in my tone. Look, I don't know, but try to get out of the house if you can. I'm going to send you my address and I'll explain everything in person. I have to go. I'm sorry. The line went dead. All the while, the hammering continued to escalate. Lydia, unlock this door. I swear, if I have to, I'll break this damn thing down. Those words sent a chill down my spine. Justin had only raised his voice at me a handful of times in the decade that I'd known him, and none of them were as threatening as that. I stood there, momentarily stunned, but a hard kick from the other side of the door was all I needed to spur me to move. I snatched my keys from the bedside table and raced to the window overlooking the front lawn. I hurriedly unlocked it and began to pull, a massive surge of adrenaline aiding my efforts. With one final heave, the window gave way, and not a moment too soon. The door began to splinter and crack. A few more hearty blows, and it was done for. I didn't have any time to waste. I punched out the screen, watching it tumble onto the shingles below. I took a deep breath before hoisting myself onto the roof. I had one leg out of the window when it happened. Whoever, or whatever, was pretending to be my husband finally managed to get inside. My eyes grew wide as he charged toward me. Lydia, don't do this. I can explain. I did not want to hear what he had to say. Maybe that was stupid of me. Maybe I should have stayed and talked things out, but in that moment, Adeline's words kept surfacing to forefront of my mind. Now I can only pray that I made the right choice. I pulled myself the remainder of the way out and slid down the roof, desperate to escape my pursuer. I yelped as I felt fingernails graze my arm. My heart jackhammered in my chest as I fell onto the grass. I scrambled to my feet, somehow unscathed aside from a few minor scratches, and bolted to my car. I flung open the door, threw myself inside, and jammed the keys into the ignition. Before I peeled out of the driveway, I briefly glanced up. Justin's look-alike was standing in the window, glowering at me. A devastating sense of dread consumed me as our eyes locked. That's what terrified me the most. His eyes. They were burning with rage, but something about them felt wrong. In fact, his entire face looked off, like he was trying to express an intense emotion, but he didn't quite know how. That instantly destroyed any qualms I had about leaving. I slammed the car into reverse and floored it. I briefly looked back as I sped away, and my stomach twisted itself into knots when I did. The window was empty. I was a wreck the whole way to Adeline's. An overwhelming flood of confusion, resentment, and fear swirled within me as the realization sank in. Justin really had cheated on me, and on top of that, he was leaving me for his mistress. It was all too much to process. I flew down the empty streets, tears trickling down my face. How did this happen? Why me? Why couldn't I have had normal marital problems, like leaving the milk out or arguing over whose turn it was to do the dishes? I didn't ask for any of this. It wasn't fair. Fortunately, I didn't have much time to think about it. Thanks to my erratic driving, I made it to Adeline's place, if you could even call it that, in 10 minutes flat. I quickly parked beside the curb and stepped out. I gazed in bewilderment at the rundown shack as I made my way to the door. The house was tiny compared to ours. Faded, yellow paint peeled off the exterior, the shutters clung on for dear life, and empty beer bottles littered the front lawn. I'd be lying if I said it didn't give me a little glint of satisfaction. I took a deep breath as I approached the door. Was I really going through with this? How could I know that Adeline was even telling the truth? Maybe I shouldn't have come. Before I had a chance to mull over any of those thoughts, the door swung open. A young woman, at least 5 years younger than me, stood in the doorway. As much as it pains me to admit it, she was beautiful. Long blonde hair flowed down to her waist, and ocean blue eyes stared into mine. She was a stark contrast to me in every way. "Lydia, come in," I smack. I slapped Adeline hard across the face, leaving an angry red imprint on her cheek. Sorry, knee-jerk reaction. She nodded, staring down at her feet. "No, I deserve that. Come in, we've got a lot to talk about." I obliged, following her lead. The inside of the home wasn't much better than the outside. Empty takeout containers were strewn about the floor, the carpet was stained with God knows what, and the whole place smelled like cigarette smoke. It took everything in me not to throw up. Adeline rushed to the couch, brushing away some stale potato chips from one of the cushions. "Sorry about the mess. You can have a seat if you want." One glance at the food-crusted sofa, and I instantly knew my answer. Thanks, but I'll stand." "If you say so," Adeline shrugged, claiming the spot for herself. "I guess I've got some explaining to do, huh?" "Yeah, you sure do." Adeline again shifted her gaze to the floor before meeting my stare. "Look, I'm really sorry about Justin. I'm not going to sit here and try to make up some half-assed excuse. I'm a terrible person." I folded my arms across my chest. "You're not wrong. Is he here right now?" "You're at fault too, but Justin's the one I'm really pissed at." "No, he's at the bar. He said he had some drinking to do." "Lydia, I'm really sorry. I know I can't make it up to you, but..." I held my hand to stop her. "As much as I'd love to berate you and listen to you suck up to me the whole night, that's not why I came. I've got bigger problems to worry about. How did you know about whatever took Justin's place?" Adeline bit her lip, twirling a few strands of hair between her fingers. "So, tonight I went with Justin to get some things from y'all's house. He said you usually took a bath around that time, so he was just going to get in and get out before you noticed. But that thing, whatever it is, it met him at the door before he could go inside. I saw them arguing, then Justin walked back to the truck, pale as a ghost. He dropped me back off here without a single word. After I saw that, I knew I had to warn you. I made Justin give me your number, and I called you right when I got home." I nodded, soaking in her revelation. "That makes sense. I was wondering how you got my info, but I still have so many questions. What is that thing, and how did it manage to replace my husband? I mean, it's even got the same truck as he does. How is that possible?" Adeline pursed her lips. "I don't know. I wish I had more answers for you, but Lydia, you have to listen to me. Whatever you're dealing with, I don't think it has good intentions. Watch this. It'll prove that I'm telling the truth," she said, pulling up a video on her phone. I leaned in to get a better look. The video was Justin. He was standing on our front porch talking to himself. I could tell right away that the one facing the camera was the fake. It was too perfect. All its features were too smooth. I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed it before. The longer I watched, the more uneasy I felt. As the conversation progressed, I could tell that the real Justin was getting heated. There was no audio, but I could see him getting visibly more angry, even with his back turned, until it happened. The imposter's face began to twist and contort in unnatural ways. It was as if someone was molding clay with an invisible hand, and that's where the video ended. The sight of it disturbed me on a primal level. My stomach churned, and my head began to spin. I seriously thought I was going to be sick. That's why I had to tell you. I couldn't just sit by and let that monster hurt. A loud pounding against the front door cut Adeline off. Lydia, are you in there? I just want to talk. Adeline and I shared a terrified glance. This couldn't be happening. How had he tracked me down? Follow me. I'll take you out the back. You parked on the street, right? Adeline whispered, leaping from the couch. Yeah, but how do I get around him? Won't he catch me if I make a break for it? Adeline met my gaze, a fiery determination gleaming in her eyes. I'll distract him. It's the least I can do. Good luck, she said, ushering me outside. The door clicked shut before I had a chance to thank her. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and without giving myself time to freak out, I raced to my car. I squeezed my keys with a vice grip as I ran, the world around me devolving into a blur of colors. I didn't even spare a glance at the front porch as I flew past. I was too focused on making it off that property alive. I was mere inches from the safety of my car. I was so close, but then I heard it. Lydia, why are you running? Come on, don't be like this. I fumbled with the keys and scrambled to hop into my car. Justin 2.0 sprinted toward me at an inhuman speed. Behind him, the door to the house was hanging wide open, and Adeline was nowhere to be found. I hurriedly turned my attention back to the steering wheel. I slammed on the gas, my tires squealing as I sped away. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my heart nearly stopped. The false Justin was standing beneath a street lamp. I don't know if it was my nerves, or maybe the poor lighting, but I could have sworn that when I looked up, he was smiling, and for a moment, I was sure that I saw blood dribbling down his chin. I hyperventilated, tears flooding down my cheeks as I sped away. Once I was satisfied with the amount of distance I'd put between myself and Justin's doppelganger, I rolled into a gas station and parked at one of the pumps. I felt so lost, so confused. What the hell had just happened? Why did this thing want to track me down so badly? And Adeline, what had he done to her? I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to that question. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my palpitating heart. It's going to be okay. Just calm down and come up with a game plan. It'll all be over soon, I muttered, staring reassuringly at myself in the rearview mirror. I didn't truly believe that, but I had to do something. I couldn't afford to keep crying my eyes out and waiting there like a sitting duck. I needed a plan. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I hopped out of my car and prepaid for gas. My head was on a swivel as I inserted the nozzle of the tank. The gas station was desolate, except for an older gentleman smoking a cigarette by the front door. My foot tapped against the concrete as the fuel gauge slowly ticked up. My heart pounded like a jackhammer the entire time, just waiting to see that familiar red truck pulling beside me. But it never did. I breathed a sigh of relief, placing the fuel pump back into its compartment. I glanced back at the man by the door for a split second before jumping back into the driver's seat. He was talking on the phone now, and was he grinning at me? I didn't want to wait to figure out what he was planning. I zipped down the road and onto the interstate. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew that I needed to get far away from my husband's look-alike. Once I was on the open road and all the fear had begun to dissipate, it hit me. Everything. The cheating, the lies and betrayal, all of it. It all crashed down on me like a tidal wave. What hurt the most was the false sense of security I was lulled into. I had let myself believe that Justin had changed, that he turned a new leaf with no provocation whatsoever. The thought that all that time, none of the love I'd been given was real, it shattered my heart all over again. I'm not ashamed to admit that I cried. I sobbed uncontrollably as I continued down sparsely populated roads. I didn't want to be on the run from some unknown entity. I wanted to go back home and take a nice warm bath, but I knew I couldn't do that. I had been driving for a little over 3.5 hours before I started to get low on fuel again. I pulled off on the nearest exit. By that point, the adrenaline had worn off, and I was starting to get tired. I soon found myself at a rundown Motel 6 in the middle of bumfuck Egypt. The red and blue sign flickered as I pulled into the parking lot. A great indicator of the quality of the room I'd be staying in. I took a deep breath and looked at myself in the mirror. "Come on, Lydia, you can do this," I murmured, stepping out of the car. My eyes darted from left to right as I made my way to check in. My BMW looked so out of place, beside all the rusted clunkers sprinkled throughout the lot. I picked up my pace, my heart rate spiking. A bell chimed as I opened the door to retrieve my key. A young man with black, greasy hair sat behind the counter, reading a Playboy magazine. He didn't even look up as I approached. Hi, can I get a room?" The boy lazily glanced up at me before releasing a sigh. "Sure, $50. I pursed my lips as I fished around in my wallet. $50 a night for this dump? What a ripoff. I slapped the cash onto the counter, thanking my lucky stars that I wouldn't have to risk getting my bank information stolen from their credit card reader. The boy, whose name tag read Steven, handed me the key for room number 12 before pocketing the cash. "Thanks," I said, shooting him a glare as I snatched the keys. He gave me a slight nod before returning to his magazine. I nearly sprinted to room 12. I hurriedly jammed the key into the lock before shoving the door open. Right as I was closing it, something caught my eye. Headlights. I kept the door cracked just enough to see. Silly, right? Surely, I was just being paranoid. There was no way that it was him. Justin's truck cruised into the parking lot. It was unmistakable. The faded red paint, the dent on the driver's side door, the crack running down the entirety of the windshield. It was all there. I quietly locked myself in the room, my head spinning. How was this happening? I was so far from home. How had he found me again? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. How stupid could I possibly be? The answer was so simple. I pulled out my phone and there it was. Justin and I were sharing our locations. With everything that had happened, I hadn't even thought to turn it off. I knew it was too late, but I turned off location services anyway. I felt nauseous as I placed my phone back in my pocket. How accurate was that thing? Did the doppelganger know what room I was in? Morbid curiosity got the best of me. I had to know. With a shaky hand, I brushed back the blinds to my window. The second I did, tears began to trickle down my cheeks, and my blood turned to ice. He was outside. Justin's impersonator was standing directly outside my window. His eyes were wide and manic. The grin he wore looked off, like it was too big for his face. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. The fake Justin walked up to the glass and paused for just a moment. The silence was so deafening that the only audible noise was the blood pumping in my ears. And then he moved. His tongue lolled out of his mouth, and he slapped it against the glass with a wet thump. He dragged it upward, those inhuman eyes never breaking contact with mine. "I found you. It's time to stop running and let me in." His smile vanished as he gritted out those words. That was enough to snap me from my stupor. I let the blinds fall over the window and stumbled backwards, nearly crashing into a table. That's where I am now, writing this at that table. I'm done for. It's only a matter of time before he breaks in. I phoned the front desk, but no one answered. I called the police too, but response times are slow this far out in the boonies. This will likely be my final update. If the cops don't show up on time, I don't know what it'll do to me. My hands are trembling as I type this. He's trying to kick the door down, and I don't think it's going to hold. To anyone reading this, please, please listen to me. If you notice a sudden change in a loved one's personality, don't brush it off, because it just might be this thing, wearing their face. This lady's quote-unquote husband was definitely not human. I bet you guys were watching this video just waiting for there to be a Skinwalker story, which, In a video titled Scary Reddit Stories Where Someone's Not Human or Something's Not Human, I would expect it. The next story's from r/no sleep from user Saturdead. A knock on the storm cellar. My daughter Cleo turned 12 not too long ago. She's lived in this house her entire life, and now we're moving out. It's not anything dramatic, we're just moving into a bigger place. She's growing up and deserves a better space, and Molly and I are in a position where we can afford it. But as we're packing up our things and looking to the future, I want to acknowledge something that happened in this house when we first moved in. Cleo was closing in on her first birthday. Molly and I were working around the clock, juggling a child, 2 full-time jobs, and a remote part-time job on the weekends. It was rough, but that's to be expected. We had planned for this family, and we were ready to pay the price. Doesn't mean we weren't acknowledging the hardships. We just moved to this house on the northern edge of Tornado Alley. While it did get the occasional storm, the place itself was safe enough that the house had never needed any serious repairs. Not from the weather, at least. We got the place a little cheaper than expected. It was an 80s style brick and mortar kind of building with a solid concrete storm cellar. 1 floor, separate garage, solid outer walls, cheap interior. You can feel the heat from the kitchen while standing in the hallway, all the way through the paper-thin faux wooden wall panels. That first month, as we moved in, we ran into our first problem. The storm cellar was having some trouble with cracks in the northernmost wall. Nothing serious, but just enough for there to be a sort of bulge. We had a guy check it out, and he acknowledged that it needed to be reinforced if we wanted to utilize the space safely. Luckily, we caught it early. The neighborhood was great, though. We lived at the end of the street near 5 other houses. Identical style, different colors. Ours was the green one. While fixing up our storm cellar, we had our first reminder of just how close to Tornado Alley we were. While those across the state line to the south were bunkering down for a possible tornado, we only had to prep for a nasty storm. Perfect start to the summer. On the day of the storm, we had a neighbor come by. Clyde, salt of the earth kind of guy, had lived there his entire life. Just a couple of years short of retirement. Clyde had the proportions of a walking meatball sporting a baseball cap. That's crazy. And yet he always seemed to be out and about, mucking around in the garden and carrying things in and out of his garage. Clyde stopped by our place and handed me a walkie-talkie. Everyone on the street has one, he explained, just so we can stay in touch if things get bad. You guys thought of everything, I smiled. Stay prepared. You don't gotta get prepared. Boy Scouts? YouTube. He winked, gave me a pat on the shoulder, and lumbered away. Now I had a fancy new walkie-talkie. Nothing expensive, and the channel was a preset, but it carried a bit of weight. Solid stuff. Molly called out when she noticed the first drops of water on the kitchen window. I was already downstairs, doing my best to prepare us for a long night ahead. There were 3 rooms, one of which we were later going to turn into a laundry room. That'd have to wait until we fixed the wall, though. For now, I had to make sure Cleo would be comfortable and that we had all the supplies we needed. I tested the walkie-talkie a couple times and got a response not just from Clyde, but a couple other neighbors too. An older woman jokingly telling us she'd come by with a casserole once the storm was over, and a grumpy middle-aged man that firmly reminded us that the channel was for emergency use only. Once everything was prepped, I waited upstairs. Cleo was having a midday fuss. Molly was firmly fixated on the kitchen window, looking out. She had this cat-like feature, like she was seeing something that I wasn't. I half expected her to tap at the window. "You all right there?" I asked. "Yeah," she mumbled. "I just don't like how it looks." The dark clouds were closing in. We were at the birth of the storm, but that didn't mean we'd have a walk in the park. Things could get bad, and we couldn't take any chances, not with Cleo. The wind picked up. I changed Cleo and got things all packed up. I put Molly away from the window as we hurried out the door. The storm cellar had this thick, tilted metal door. We hurried downstairs, and I locked the door from the inside. Not that there was a reason to, it's just what you do. Cleo settled down. I'd brought down an air mattress, and there was a cooler with a couple drinks, baby food, and snacks to keep us going. We were going to fix the place up later, but this would have to do for now. Cleo had a cozy little cot in the corner, a plastic thing that we usually brought when we traveled. Not that we had a lot of time for that kind of thing. I did a double check on all the lights and our chargers. There was this large locker in the far-off room with the bulging wall. I presume that locker held the fuse box. The thing was old as hell, and the warning stickers had long since faded, so I didn't want to touch anything. Still, I figured it was good to know where to go if the power cut out. We didn't get very good reception down there, but Molly had a couple of shows preloaded on her iPad so we could watch some reruns later in the night. The wind kept going. I could hear it cut along the corner of the house, rattling the gutters. The raindrops had gone from tapping on the door to passing us by as the rain turned sideways. Staying down there was just a precaution, but by the way things were going, we had the right idea. It got pretty bad, pretty fast. People started talking over the walkie-talkie, even the grumpy middle-aged guy. "Looks like the tree in the yard is going down," someone said. "Fence is shaking something awful," another said. Clyde, on the other hand, just kept checking in with people. We had an hourly roll call, and when he noticed one of us wasn't responding, he decided to go and do something about it. There was this old man living down the street that hadn't picked up, and Clyde was getting worried. "Old guy lives on his own, surrounded by floppy disks and TV dinners. I'll head over to check on him in a bit." A couple of people protested, but Clyde wasn't having it. Apparently he used to be an army medic. Molly was sitting in the other room, rocking Cleo back and forth. She had this song about a blue sunflower that her parents taught her, and it always puts Cleo to sleep. A couple of tunes from that lullaby was all it took. It was like a magic trick, or an off switch. I sat down next to them as the wind raged outside. Molly turned her attention to me. "Did they say anything?" she whispered. "About what?" "About what's going on up there." "It's pretty rough," I admitted. "Clyde's heading to check on someone." "Did something happen?" "Not sure, maybe. They're not responding." Molly nodded, looking up as if staring out an invisible window. "I don't know," she whispered. "I got this bad feeling, like today is special." As if responding, the electronics locker in the other room made an uncomfortable noise, a stark reminder that this was just the beginning. The sun was setting, but the storm raged on. It wasn't speeding up or slowing down, but there was this constant pressure on the side of our house. You could hear the way it was blowing, pulling at the roof tiles. Every now and then, you'd hear something heavy fall over or scrape against the facade. Molly was taking a well-deserved nap with Cleo while I was sitting in the other room waiting by the walkie-talkie. I wasn't exactly expecting anything, but someone had to stay prepared if something happened. So far, we were doing pretty good. There were a couple of alarming sounds coming from the locker, but I chalked that up as protest of an old house, or cheap wiring. As long as the lights stayed on, I wasn't touching it. Breaker boxes and I don't get along. The others were chatting a little back and forth, checking in on each other and waiting for Clyde to return. When he finally did, I could tell something was wrong. He was winded. "Someone broke in," he wheezed. "Front door's busted. The whole place has been turned upside down." "Holy shit, you sure?" The middle-aged grumpy guy quickly changed his tone. "Not so grumpy anymore, huh? There's blood on the floor, but there's no one there. I don't know what's going on. I called the police, but they can't do anything until the storm passes." The old woman chimed in. "Everyone, make sure your doors and windows are locked tight." As we reassured one another, I could hear one voice disappear into the background. I wasn't sure about who they were, but I could tell I'd heard them a couple of times prior. They were a neighbor, but I couldn't pinpoint their house. "Someone's knocking," they said, trying to speak over the buzz of voices. "Someone's knocking on my door." "Don't open," Clyde said. "You stay right where you are. Storm's getting bad. I barely made it back. Ain't no way no sane person is running around there at this hour." "You sure it's someone knocking?" the older woman asked. "It's not just a branch?" "I'm sure," the man repeated. "They did the tap 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 thing." "Just making sure you heard me," Clyde repeated. "You don't open that door. I hear you." A storm can easily play tricks on you. If you listen long enough, you can start hearing things. It's like watching static on the TV. After a while, you start imagining one side gaining strength, or conscious movement. The same goes for a storm. It can almost seem alive. Cleo woke up for a little while. I made sure she was fed and cared for, giving Molly some well-earned rest. Baby in hand, I wandered back and forth listening. There were these little creaks and cracks everywhere. The bulge in the wall, the metal door, the roof tiles. Anything could be a knock, or hide a careful step. What had happened to the old man down the street? Had Clyde really walked in on the aftermath of a murder? Cleo wasn't happy about being carried, so I turned to get her back to her mother. As I walked past the stairs leading up to the cellar door, I stopped. Looking up, I perked my ears. Was that a knock? Strange things were being talked about on the walkie-talkie. Someone else had heard a knock. The old woman wasn't sure. She might have heard one too. And most recently, one of them stopped responding entirely. They tried to discuss the disappearance rationally, but Clyde wasn't having it. There ain't nothing wrong with my walkies, he stated. If someone ain't responding, someone's wrong. He's been here all day. I can't see why he'd go away now. Didn't he say he heard a knock too? The old woman added. That don't mean anything, the middle-aged man sighed. Be prepared. I'm calling the police again, Clyde said. Soon as the weather clears, I want cars lining the street. I don't know what to think. It could be nothing. There could be 100 reasons why you stop responding. The button could be broken, or the battery ran out. Maybe he fell asleep, or left it in the other room. But then again, why would he? It was a tense situation, and we all knew it. No one was taking this lightly. As I checked in on Molly, I noticed her mumbling in her sleep. Nothing big, but it was unusual for her. She was a very heavy sleeper. As I backed away to give her some space, I noticed the pattern of what she was saying. She wasn't just mumbling nonsense. She was talking. Come in, she mumbled. Come in. As the hours passed, there were less voices on the walkie-talkie. A couple might have fallen asleep, but I got the feeling that there was something more to it. Clyde was having the same idea, but couldn't bring himself to go back out. It's one thing to be out in the storm, but another thing entirely to be out in the dark. I'm telling you, there's something out there, Clyde said. There were tears in the wallpaper. The kitchen door was pulled straight off the hinges. Someone went berserk in there. I'd been quiet for some time. I didn't want to wake Cleo, but she was out cold. You sure it wasn't the storm? I asked. Yeah, Clyde responded. A storm don't break down the front door and leave the living room, you know. I was about to respond when I heard something. I turned my head and took my thumb off the receiver. That was definitely a knock on the cellar door. I sat there listening. After a couple of seconds, the knock came back. Twice this time. Harder. Then I noticed something in the other room. Molly was getting up. She held Cleo tight and walked towards the stairs. She must have heard the knocking. There was no way she'd miss it. Honey, what are you doing? I asked. It took me a moment to realize she had her eyes closed. She was heading for the door, still mumbling to herself. Come in. I put my hand on her shoulder and saw the white in her eyes light up. She turned my way, blinking away the sleep. What are you doing? I asked again. What? She looked around, just as confused as I was. Once she realized she was on her feet, she turned back towards the mattress without a word. Were you going upstairs? I asked. It felt like the right thing to do. What are you talking about? I'm sorry, she sighed. I'm tired. Don't listen to me. The moment she sat down, the knock came back, louder this time, insistent. I walked up the stairs and made sure the door was locked. I could hear the wind outside, threatening to grab hold of the door and break it open. But there was another sound too, something just on the other side. I'm not sure if it was some kind of breathing, but it was something heavy. Something that didn't have the same rhythm as the storm. Then again, I could have just been listening for too long. It's like when you say a word too many times and it starts to sound like a noise. Going back down, I peeked in on Molly. She was out like a light. Clyde, you there? I said, whispering into the walkie-talkie. Yeah, what's up? There's someone out there, I said. There was a knock. Who the hell is outside in this weather? I don't know, but I don't like it. I don't know what to do. I'd come over, but it's too risky. What do I do? Clyde came up with a couple ideas. He suggested I make sure I knew where the flashlights were in case the power cut out. I wasn't too worried about that, seeing as I had the locker with the electric stuff in the other room. He also suggested keeping a low profile, but only up until the point where someone is clearly trying to break in. If it was a burglar, making your presence known would probably scare them off. I didn't tell him about Molly and her unusual behavior. I didn't know what to make of it, and just talking about it out loud would make me sound paranoid. Maybe storms make people behave strangely. They say crime goes up during full moons. Who's to say sleepwalking doesn't go up during storms? If it's you they're after, and not your things, be prepared, Clyde said. They'll try to trick you. They'll probably pull the power, or do something to grab your attention. Don't fall for it. Grab my attention? Like what? The moment I said it, a new noise cut through the wind. My car alarm. I asked Clyde if he could see it from his house. Turns out he could. My car was in the driveway, flipped over. No other car on our street had flipped over. I could hear the wind scraping against the walkie-talkie as he called back to me. It's on the side, he gasped. Driver's side. The storm wasn't strong enough to do that, but then again, neither was a person. You see anyone? Anyone at all? It's hard to tell. There's just this big clothesline. Clothesline? Yeah, there are these gray metal poles sticking out. I think it's... There was a short pause. We didn't have a clothesline. That's what our upcoming laundry room was for. Clyde's voice came back. Never mind. Must have been debris. It's gone. I can't see shit. Over the next hour, things started getting weird. I heard glass shatter upstairs, and what sounded like someone climbing in through a window. There were footsteps, and the sound of furniture falling over. Someone slammed a door. Molly and Cleo slept through the whole thing. I wanted to wake her, just to make sure she was prepared, but something didn't seem right. She wasn't herself. None of this was normal. I was trying to hear Clyde, but I could barely make out what he was saying. I had to hold the walkie-talkie up to my ear as the noises grew louder. He was telling me to keep quiet, to listen, and to wait. If they were ransacking the house, they most probably wouldn't be looking for me or my family. Hopefully, it was just some opportunist trying to make a quick buck. Then, the power cut out. Molly? I whispered. She didn't answer. I fumbled for my flashlight as I held down the button on the walkie-talkie. Power outage, I said. Is it just me, or did you... No, it's just you, Clyde interrupted. You know where the breaker is? Yeah, it's right here. I'm in the cellar. There was a pause. I turned my flashlight to the big locker. No, it ain't, Clyde said. It's near the back door. You sure? Our houses are built the same. The breaker is by the back door. I would have to go upstairs if I wanted to turn the power back on. That made sense. I'd mixed up the breaker box with some kind of storage locker. I'd imagine hearing all kinds of weird electrical noise coming from it, but that's just the kind of tricks the storm plays on you. I figured I might check on it anyways, just to be sure. I placed my hand on the locker. As I did, another knock. And an echo from the cellar door right upstairs. The wind suddenly intensified as a gust rushed down the stairs. Hurrying out to see what was going on, I realized the cellar door was wide open. Sweeping the rooms with my flashlight, I couldn't see Molly. I called out to her and Cleo, but there was no response. I checked every corner to make sure, but there was no doubt about it. She was gone. My mouth went dry as I ran up the stairs. Poking my head out into the storm, I noticed a small silhouette walking away in the distance. It was holding something. It had to be Molly. I called out to her again, but still no response. I followed her into the storm, feeling the water rush through my shoes. The wind almost overwhelmed me, but I managed to keep my balance by leaning into it. There was no way she could hear me. I could barely hear my own breathing. I tried to hold on to that phantom image of Molly and Cleo, but they were getting further and further away. Now, I don't know the area that well, but I knew there was a wheat field straight ahead. There was also a storage shed. I couldn't imagine what compelled her to head that way, but it was the only structure out there. In the moments where I lost sight of her, I headed for the shed. That would get me a glimpse of her again and again, making me think that's where she's headed. My feet were going numb from the cold, and my teeth kept chattering. I didn't know if it was just the cold or the stress. I couldn't think straight. There was no world where my Molly would take our daughter into a raging storm. The walkie-talkie crackled and complained. I crossed a knee-high fence swaying in the wind, raindrops peltering the left side of my face, as I saw the shed further down the trail. And right next to it, Molly. I hurried up to the shed, dashing through the wheat, letting it soak straight through me. I got to the door, slammed it open, and hurried inside. Molly was right there, curled up on the floor right next to boxes of farming equipment and old iron tools. She was sleeping soundly, and Cleo was too. They were both soaked right through, but neither seemed bothered. I got down on my knees and wrapped them up in a hug, trying to whisper through my panting breaths. "What were you thinking?" Molly didn't wake up. She just adjusted herself, sound asleep, muttering, "Mothers know." The door swung wide open. I must not have closed it enough. Something snagged on it and the wind grabbed hold. I looked back at Molly, but she didn't seem bothered. Turning around, I could have sworn I heard something through the rush of the wind. The windows were shaking in their frames, and the wheat swayed back and forth, but there was something else, something rhythmic. Footsteps? There was movement in the corner of my eye, someone outside the window. I got up, grabbed a spade from one of the shelves, and readied myself. My blood ran cold as my teeth kept chattering. The adrenaline was getting to me. My fingers cramped around the handle of the spade. Another thump. Something was on top of the shed. I saw a hand, a big, gray hand. It reached down from the roof, down the front of the shed. I could see it in the open door. The arm was impossibly long and single-jointed, thin like a broom handle. I couldn't take my eyes off it. Slowly but surely, it grabbed a hold of the door and gently closed it with a firm click. Seconds later, it climbed down. As it did, I heard Molly stir. She mumbled again, "Thank you." A noise in response, a knock. I sat next to Molly and Cleo for hours as the storm died down. We spent the entire night in that shed. It wasn't a bad idea to take shelter there. This thing had been built to last. If something can survive 40 to 50 years of bad weather without toppling over, it has to be doing something right. Clyde's voice came through somewhere around 4 a.m. The police were coming, they just had to clear the roads. Apparently, there had been other people calling about disturbances, home invasions. No one seemed to be hurt, though. They were all accounted for. The middle-aged grumpy guy and old lady included. When Molly finally woke up, she seemed just as confused as I was. As the wind died down, she looked up at me with half-closed eyes. "I had the strangest dream," she yawned. "Where are we?" Going back to the house, I got a clear view of the damage. Something had torn through our back door and ransacked our house, just like Clyde described. Molly didn't want to go inside, thinking it probably wasn't safe for Cleo to be around a bunch of broken furniture and glass, so she decided to wait in the car. Turns out she hadn't heard the part about it being flipped on the side. She settled on waiting at Clyde's place for the time being. Meanwhile, I went into the storm cellar to check the extent of the damage and to get Cleo's things, but just a couple steps down the stairs, I noticed something. Blood. Turning on my flashlight, I went downstairs, being careful not to touch the red trail. At the bottom of the stairs, it took a sharp turn to the right. It led straight into the storage locker, the one I thought had been the breaker box. There was a dead man in it. When I say dead man, I don't know for certain. The body was completely destroyed. A couple of limbs lay strewn across the floor, and most of the skin around the face had been peeled back like a ripe orange. And there, by what I guess had once been his feet, was a gun, a loaded handgun. I could barely see it for all the viscera. I ran out of there as fast as I could. When I saw the squad cars, I pointed and screamed. When I got to Molly, I held her close and stroked her hair, more so to calm myself than anything else. She was safe. Cleo was safe. That's all I cared about. As I held her close and watched the flashlights descend on our house, she whispered to me. "I dreamt there was someone coming to warn us," she said. "Someone who lived with an old man and was terribly, terribly sad." I don't know what to say. I didn't want to tell her what I'd seen. Not yet. There'd be plenty of time to look into it later, but for now, I just held her. The future could wait a little longer. In the days that followed, a lot of details emerged. The old man Clyde went to check on had been found shot. It seemed to be a failed home invasion. The perpetrator had fled, as if chased by something. He had hidden in our basement. He must have slipped in while I was going up and down, moving Cleo's things. Bad timing, I suppose. He probably just saw an open door and rushed inside. He must have been desperate. He'd hidden in the storage locker, waiting for the night to pass. He'd been a couple of feet away all night with a loaded weapon, ready to take me down if I so much as touched the handle on that locker. He probably would have done it too. He had plenty of ammo to spare, and he was known to be a decent shot. But there was something else, something I can't quite explain. There had been something out in the storm, something he was fleeing from, something that had come to warn us, knocking on that door, trying to find a way to get to us. It had been looking for him all down the street, tearing through every house to find him, even flipping a car like he was checking under a carpet. Not to hurt us, not to tear us apart, but to stop him. And for one reason or another, Molly heard that warning. I suppose in some ways, mothers just know. The strangest detail is his death, though. Despite all that gore, the man in our storm cellar didn't die from having his arms torn off. He died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Now that Cleo has turned 12, we've decided to leave that house. The storm cellar looks very different today than it did all those years ago. The storage locker is gone, and the laundry room is all set up. The wall is fixed, haven't had a problem with it for a long time. Whoever buys the place will have a very different first impression of it. Clyde is still around. Our old neighbor is pretty close-knit, and I'm sad to leave them all behind, but sometimes you just have to trust your gut, even when it tells you to move. Or more importantly, when it tells you to walk into the storm. Cleo is almost a teenager now. It's impossible that she would ever remember something from that night, but I still get the impression that it left something with her. Whenever she knocks on the door, she uses that same pattern. And sometimes, in her sleep, I hear her mumbling, just like her mother did that night. Just little things. I'm okay. Sleep tight. See you tomorrow. Looking back, there are so many things that scare me about that night. The thought of losing my family, an armed man waiting for an opportunity, a long gray arm opening a door, and what it did to a man it despised. This one, being the last story of this video, it's good that it had a good ending. Anyways, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, I can't believe you just listened to me tell scary stories for 3 hours. I mean, that's awesome. I want to actually see who made it to the end of this video, so if you did, comment sushi or something like that. I don't know. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.